across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening and welcome to the Political Asylum right here on Talk. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan and I'll be your host for 3 thrilling hours of news, views and top drawer topical debate all the way to 10 o'clock. Get involved, get on the show, get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000. That's 0344 499 1000. Or you can WhatsApp voice note me on the same number and I promise to play your message out. That's a guarantee. It's Monday, March the 9th. Here's what's coming up. 4 days ago, I broke the story on Talk Drive and Reform UK's astonishing meltdown continues apace. My well-informed assessment: Rupert Lowe is not coming back. So if you're a Reform supporter, here's your choice. Reform and Farage, or Mr. Lowe all on his own. There is no in-between. There will be no peace settlement here, no rapprochement, no way back. Your thoughts? 0344 499 1000. That other great Reform defector, Ben Habib, who spoke furiously to me of Nigel Farage's leadership style on Friday, rejoins me in a few minutes with the latest developments in an astonishing saga that some critics believe could spell the end for the Reform dream. But can Farage and his gang recover? 0344 499 1000. In other news, why was a Hamas fanatic who openly campaigns for the destruction of all Jews on TikTok and YouTube able to sneak into Britain so easily? Palestinian anti-Israel madman Abdul Wadeh was finally arrested last night, Sunday, after roaming free since he arrived on a small boat on Thursday. Why wasn't this terrorist arrested immediately? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, my friend and colleague, the brilliant Alex Phillips, will be with us in a little while with her take on alarming new statistics revealing that a quarter of all sex crimes in Britain are committed by foreigners. What's going on here? 0344 499 1000. Also tonight, more than 2,000 migrants have crossed the channel illegally in just 8 days. So how's Starmer's smash the gangs strategy going? 0344 499 1000. And in 5 years of spending generously, Britain has splashed out an eye-watering £6.6 billion on what they asylum seeker support. That means freebies and presents and gifts like trips to the zoo, tennis lessons, visits to football stadiums, language classes and friendship services, whatever that means. Are these lavish gifts to Tia Keir's idea of a deterrent? 0344 499 1000. Plus, more evidence that the BBC lives on a planet of its own as the state broadcaster's chairman states that the majority of Brits support the migrants, illegal migrants, eh? Do they? Or is that the news from the BBC? 0344 499 1000. Energy watchdog Ofgem employees have received more than £5 million in bonuses. That's good news, isn't it? Presumably on the basis they're doing such an amazing job protecting consumers from the vicissitudes of volatile global price fluctuations. They seem very happy with themselves. Are you happy with them? 0344 499 1000. Also tonight, Talk's international editor Isabel Oakeshott reporting live from Tel Aviv on the disintegrating ceasefire in Gaza. And we'll get the latest from Saudi as Americans and the Ukrainians, including Zelensky, get round the table for peace talks. 0344 499 1000. And finally, evidently the last to notice, Netflix bosses are apparently extremely worried about the dreadful reviews of With Love Meghan and fear the worst as Ms Markle's mind-numbingly dull cooking dirge plummets out of the top 10 of the viewing charts. It's a boring and pointlessly irrelevant programme. What did they expect? Kinsey Schofield is standing by in Los Angeles. 0344 499 1000. All that and so much more, so don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Monday night together. Now, without further ado, let's go over to the man in question, the chairman now of the Great British PAC, of course, former deputy leader of Reform UK, who was with me last Friday night when this whole kind of shambles exploded live, when suddenly I was about to interview Ben and this letter came through from Reform UK accusing Rupert Lowe of inappropriate behaviour with two female colleagues, apparently bullying them, allegedly making fun of one of their disabilities. Also, the party chairman, Zia Youssef, claiming that Rupert Lowe had threatened to kill him, threatened him with violence, and that the police were involved. Then Rupert Lowe responded furiously, saying none of this was true, and so on and so forth. And we are still living through this psychodrama as we speak. So very pleased to have back on the show Ben Habib. First of all, Ben, your thoughts. I know that you wrote to Rupert Lowe last Friday, I believe it was. We'll read that letter out in just a moment. But your thoughts on what's happened over this extraordinary weekend?
Well, I mean, the text that I wrote to Rupert basically forewarned, you're going to read it, so I won't steal my own thunder, as it were. But the text I wrote to Rupert basically forewarned him that the playbook that Zia Youssef uses and Nigel uses for setting people aside in the party that they don't like is one of calling them into question, discrediting them, and sacking them. And so when people then put up their defense for what the accusations have been, they're dismissed as being, you know, those of people who've already been discredited and dismissed, and they're rubbished in that process. And this has happened to dozens and dozens and dozens of good grassroots members of Reform right across the country, people whom I campaigned with shoulder to shoulder. So when I was on the show with you on Friday and that statement came in from Reform, I absolutely knew that it was full of lies. It's something I've already seen many, many times. And so 10 days ago, I think it was the 28th of February in the morning, it suddenly dawned on me that they were going to do exactly the same thing to Rupert. And I wrote to Rupert. And
shall we read that out now, Ben?
Yeah, read it. Read it now.
So
read it now,
this is what Ben wrote to Rupert Lowe on Friday. That is, of course, in the morning before any of us knew what was about to unfold, which was this sensational falling out as Reform UK issued their statement and Rupert Lowe issued his counter statement. This is what Ben wrote to Rupert Lowe before any of that unfolded, before the public knew. Good morning, Rupert. The drumbeat of a rift between you and Reform is getting louder. Many people are asking me and telling me. Needless to say, don't allow them to throw you out and thereby control the narrative. They'll find some cock and bull story to justify their decision, and any defence you offer will be dismissed as being wrong, bitter and twisted. If the rift is irreconcilable, as most are with Nigel, you put in brackets, you should take control of events and resign. Then you control the narrative and the truth behind your rift will win over their lies. I know the above is obvious, but I'd kick myself if I did not mention it and events then unfolded in their favour. Happy to chat if you'd like. What a shame that Nigel cannot be a team player. Well, very strong words from you. As I say, very important to stress. That's before any of the public knew about what was about to come. Now, at that point, Rupert Lowe was aware of what you call the drumbeat. He knew that something was in the offing, that relations between him and Nigel hadn't been good for some time. Possibly since the day Elon Musk tweeted, "Not sure Nigel Farage has what it takes to be a leader. Rupert Lowe looks like a good guy." Possibly that was the beginning of the falling out, that Nigel Farage didn't like that. And to this day, I think probably because of that tweet, I'm afraid it is a fact that Rupert Lowe has a bigger social media reach than Nigel Farage. That could be the reason. But did you, at that point, when you wrote that letter, spot that what's about to happen to Rupert Lowe is similar to what happened to you?
I mean, with me, I wasn't damaged, or they didn't try to damage me in the same way that they went for Rupert. You know, Nigel removed me as deputy leader, and then I removed myself from the party because I disagree with Nigel on certain fundamental things, principally the structure of the party. So my reputation was unsullied by my departure from Reform. But most people don't get that privilege. Most people have their reputations dragged through the mud by Zia Yusuf and Nigel on the way out. And with Rupert, it was even worse. And that's why I was really very moved, Kevin, when you read out their statement on Friday, I think it was, Thursday or Friday, when I was on your show. Friday. And I was absolutely livid listening to it, because what they sought to do with Rupert was not just destroy his reputation, they tried to destroy the man. You know, part of the allegations made against him was that he had verbally threatened Zia Yusuf, albeit in December, and they'd made a complaint to the police. Now, you only complain to the police when you want someone locked up in prison. You think they've done something worthy of being locked up in prison. They're trying to get Rupert Lowe, a perfectly law-abiding, brilliant British patriot, loyal to Reform, a preeminent voice in our movement, locked up. And so I was absolutely sort of boiling over, you might recall, Kevin, when we had our chat, because you revealed all of this to me. And of course, since those false accusations were made against Rupert, it now transpires that the women they claim the women they implied he bullied in that statement actually weren't bullied by him. There's no complaint by those women against him. And as I've already mentioned, this so-called verbal threat to physically harm Zia was made in December. And, you know, if it was so threatening and so difficult for Zia to cope with, why did he not complain to the Metropolitan Police back in December? The whole thing was trumped up by Nigel Farage and Zia Yusuf to just get rid of and destroy Rupert. And for me, that is utterly unforgivable. You cannot row back from that position. You cannot row back from a position of making a series of false complaints, trying to destroy a good man. Unacceptable. And I had said Zia Yusuf should go. I think that night I tweeted Zia Yusuf should be sacked. And Nigel had an opportunity to distance himself from Zia, blame Zia, sack him, take Rupert back into the fold and do the right thing. Instead, Nigel doubled down. He wrote an article in the Sunday Telegraph, which damned Rupert again. And so I'm afraid Nigel has chosen to side with Zia Yusuf, back him up against Rupert, who is the good man in this feud. And Nigel, therefore, in my opinion, if there's to be any future for Reform, Nigel Farage has to go. Nigel Farage has to resign. If there's no future for Nigel Farage, no honest future for Nigel Farage in the British political landscape. He may make it through this. He may maintain the polls. But I tell you what, Kevin, no decent politician, no decent thinking, clear thinking, pro-British a member of our movement is going to join Reform for fear of that which happened to Rupert. Nigel is not going to be able to recruit the kind of people he needs to form a government. Therefore, even if Reform, by some miracle, maintains its position in the polls and Nigel found his way into government, he would not help this country. He would be damaging to this country. And so Nigel needs to go. Nigel Farage, you need to resign. You've had multiple opportunities to save this country. You've been put in a pivotal position and you've abused it. You need to go and allow Rupert to run Reform UK.
And what did you feel about, again, you lived it with me. I mean, it happened as we were both on air. You were literally waiting to come through into the studio via the magic of Zoom, of course. When this statement dropped, I have to sort of delay the show to read it. So we saw it as it unfolded. Are we talking here, Ben? I mean, I thought purely strategically, politically, to react like that, I thought was impetuous and ill-advised by Reform. Whatever was going on, they shouldn't have released that statement. It sort of took a match and set it and threw it into the petrol can, really. They might have been better to hold that off. But are you saying essentially here that it is Nigel Farage's ego that threatens the Reform UK dream?
That is precisely what I'm saying. At the heart of all of this is a narcissist, a man who thinks that Brexit wouldn't have happened if he solely delivered Brexit. By the way, we haven't got Brexit, just to be clear on that point, another point of difference between Nigel and me. A man who thinks that I wouldn't have got a single vote in Wellingborough if it hadn't been for him. A man who thinks we wouldn't have got 5 MPs if it hadn't been for him. He forgets that actually for the period between January 2020 and the 3rd of June 2024, he was off making money off the political landscape. And it was people like Richard Tice, myself, David Bull and others who actually put Reform, and all our supporters and campaigners and so on, many of whom have been sacked since. We were the people who put Reform up to a 16% polling on the day that the election was called. And during the election, we got a 14% result. We were the people who delivered the 5 MPs into Parliament, including Nigel. And yet Nigel has the temerity to go on there and say it was all him. And he points to the polling results after the election and say, well, that's all me too. And he forgets that, of course, if you've got 5 MPs in Parliament, you now have the attention of the media in a way that you never had before. And you were bound to rise in the polls. And you cannot get the I out of Nigel. Everything you hear him say, it's about I, me. It's not, Nigel. It's about we, us, the country. You've got to start changing the way you think. If you want a future in British politics, you've got to remember you represent the people. It's not about you, Nigel. It's about the people. You represent the people. That's the point about a democracy. And he's lost it. He's lost that thread. Even with the Southport riots, he made a tweet the other day in which he said that he was owed an apology because of the protests that took place after that. He didn't make any mention of Peter Lynch, who was thrown into jail for what he said, not what he did, and hanged himself in jail because he couldn't take it. He made no mention of the dozens of people who were arrested and incarcerated because of what they said. He was worried about himself. He wanted an apology from the government. No one in politics deserves to be patted on the back for what they do. They're in politics because presumably they wish to deliver for the country. It's not about getting pat on the back and it's all about me. It's about delivering for the country. Get on and deliver for the country. That's what matters.
Let's pick up this conversation straight after these messages, Ben. Stay where you are.
thousands of people. I think, if my figures are correct, I think 1,900 people came in just last week alone. We don't know. Some people are not, registering. They're just going on the run. And who knows, they could be going into terrorist cells in the country and nobody in the country ever knows who these people are.
Yeah.
And that's the really scary thing. And this is what, the organization that we pay for, Prevent, is meant to prevent. And yet, it's just another attack waiting to happen.
It really is.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. We're still talking about this astonishing Reform UK meltdown, Rupert Lowe versus Nigel Farage. And I am still talking to former deputy leader of that party, Ben Habib. Ben, I've got a text. I've got quite a few texts here. Here's one from Amanda. Come on, Ben Habib, please put your disagreements behind you and return to Reform UK. The country needs good men like you and Rupert Lowe, country first. Try to explain to Amanda why it is that people like that you and Rupert Lowe will not be returning to Reform UK. Why does Nigel Farage make Reform UK such a hostile environment for good men like yourself and Rupert Lowe? What's going on here? Why is it so difficult for you?
Well, how could anyone return to a party where the leader reports one of its senior members to the police? How could you return to that party? How can Rupert return to Reform? It's impossible. They've tried to incarcerate Rupert. They've tried to destroy his life. There's no going back to it. This is not a matter of, please heal this in private, have a beer and get over it. It's not that issue. If someone tries to put you in jail for something that, frankly, is not worth, in fact, it's not even worth a complaint at a personal level, let alone reporting it to the Metropolitan Police. If they try to put you in jail for that, they're people with whom you cannot do business. And Nigel and Zia absolutely revealed their colours when they went for Rupert's jugular. But well before that, just to give Amanda a fuller answer to her question, the real issue here is that for Reform to succeed, it needs the ability to attract very good people. The task ahead to save the United Kingdom is vast. We can't have mediocre parliamentarians in Reform. We need the best of the best, the clearest thinkers, the most deep thinkers, the broadest thinkers, and fearless thinkers who can come into Parliament with Reform and do what's required to save the country. Now, these people are going to be Samsons in their own right. They will have the limelight. They will have the media on them. And Nigel should want that. But Nigel is small-minded. Nigel is a narcissist. Anyone like Rupert who shows themselves capable of being a Samson, capable of making these arguments and delivering for the country, rival Nigel for the media limelight, for the attention. And Nigel can't bear it. And so when, for example, Elon Musk said, Rupert's the man, not Nigel, that was the point. I'm sure of it. That was the point at which Nigel decided Rupert's got to go because he's getting too big for himself. And Nigel, when he spoke about me on LBC to Nick Ferrari, he said, Ben's too big for his boots. Who the hell is Nigel to judge whether I'm too big for my boots or not? As if he has a monopoly on determining who should get to be heard and who shouldn't. Nigel is just but one human being. No human being is irreplaceable. This is a movement, Kevin, of which you are part, so many listeners in Talk are part. This is a movement to save the United Kingdom from 30 years of governance on a liberal global scale, which is destroying our country. That's what it is. It's not about Nigel. It's about the people of this country. It's about this country. And Nigel makes it about himself, and that makes it impossible for good people to join Reform. So as I was saying, even if Nigel were to get into office, into government, he is not the man, because he will never attract the caliber of people around him to deliver for the country. They won't join him because they will fear precisely what's happened to Rupert, and dare I say it myself.
And as far as you're concerned, I mean, in other words, you would not remotely consider withdrawing reform unless Nigel Farage goes. If Nigel Farage went, you would consider it.
Nigel's part of the problem. He's not part of the solution. I'm not joining reform while Nigel is leader.
And would you have Rupert Lowe join you in the Great British PAC, your new organisation?
Absolutely. Any sane individual from our movement is welcome in the Great British Political Action Committee. We're not a political party. We are a pressure group to make sure that the country is saved. And so the political parties, as far as I can see it, spend so much time dealing with the 24-hour news cycle. They never sit down and reflect on what needs to be done. So we will do all that reflection for them. We're going to draft policies, find the right candidates, draft the legislation that's needed to restore our country, and have it all ready for 2029. So when, I think, with certainty, by the way, Labour's not coming in for a second term. With certainty, we're going to get something on the right-hand side of politics forming the next government. And the Great British PAC is going to make sure that they have the tools at their disposal actually to deliver for the country. That's where my focus is at the moment.
Now, a couple of points, Ben, just before you go, just general points about reform. Reform supporters are extremely disappointed by all of this. I was noting on Friday that they were reacting in their thousands. Our switchboard was absolutely jammed. Not in anger, but in sorrow. They were very sad to see this. But prior to that, I know for a fact also, they were rather disappointed to see Nigel Farage suddenly standing up, I think it was early January or sometime like that, saying that Reform UK would consider allowing Shamima Begum, the ISIS bride, back into the country to face British justice, go to jail and all that. Well, I thought that Reform UK's line was that she shouldn't be allowed in the country. I think that's what most Reform supporters want. They don't want her back here. I would certainly agree with that. And then, subsequent to that, we suddenly hear Charlie Mullins, the Pimlico plumber, telling us that he's been selected as a potential candidate for Reform UK at the next election. Charlie Mullins is a very nice guy, lovely guy to have a drink with, but he is a manic Remainer, and by the way, was something of an extremist when it came to us all getting our anti-COVID jabs. He thought we should be ostracised, sent to Coventry forever and never talked to again if we didn't get our injections. Now, both of those standpoints, particularly the Remainer one, what has that got to do with Reform UK? Why is Reform UK saying we'll have a guy like this as our candidate? He stands for everything that Reform doesn't.
So, I mean, you've touched on another really important vein of issues with Nigel. He's been pivoting from the sort of right-hand side of politics to the mainstream middle, being prepared to take Shamima Begum, who's a complete nutcase, an anti-British, anti-pathetic, terrorist-loving nutcase. Take her back into this country after the insipid Sajid Javid had the good sense to get rid of her. I mean, what is Nigel thinking? And then, as you say, Charlie Mullins. And Nigel is also on the record saying he's not in favour of mass deportation of illegal migrants. There are over 1 million illegal migrants in the UK. They are criminals. They got into our country by breaking the law. They should be detained and deported. End of story.
Yeah, why does
no
he keep,
debate to be had.
That's a good point, Ben, because, of course, Rupert Lowe's very strong on this, has been tweeting it, has said it in the chamber, that he wants, there are hundreds of thousands. They reckon maybe over 1 million illegal migrants living in Britain.
Absolutely.
And Rupert Lowe says he wants them deported. He wants mass deportations. You're right, Nigel Farage, his line is always, it's just not practically possible. Well, I would suggest that's not very Trumpian, is it? Donald Trump would do it.
It's very anti-British. It's very anti the country to say, well, it's not possible, so we won't do it. I mean, if Winston Churchill had taken that line, he would have said, well, it's desperately difficult to defeat the Nazis. We'll just hand the United Kingdom over. You don't hand your country over to a foreign invader like the Nazis just because it's a difficult job to fight the bastards. You fight the bastards, right? And these people broke into our country. They're here criminally. They're illegal. It doesn't matter how difficult it is to detain and deport them. That is the right thing to do. And we must start doing the right thing. And for Nigel to take the politically expedient, easy route is yet another example of why Nigel isn't fit to be Prime Minister.
Exactly. Very good point. Thank you very much, Ben. Really good to talk to you. Always a pleasure. Ben Habib there, chairman of the British PAC there. So Ben Habib saying he's not fit to be Prime Minister, not fit for high office. About Nigel Farage, what do you think about that? Is Ben right? Or is Nigel Farage right? Nigel Farage maintains he's Prime Minister material. I do think it's fair to say that Nigel Farage is the focus of Reform UK. He is why they're where they are today. But I think that Ben and Rupert Lowe are all suggesting that it's gone to his head a bit much, and as he says, he's got a messiah complex. I also think Rupert Lowe didn't go to the Daily Mail just like that. Oh, I know, I'll go and give a quick interview to the Daily Mail saying that Nigel Farage is wrecking everything. He's got a messiah complex, and he is running a protest group, not a proper political party. He didn't just do that. He did it because he could sense the wagons were circling. He could sense he was in trouble. And I think that interview was a kind of preemptive strike. And the rest, as you know, is history. What do you make of all that? Let me know. 03444 991 After the break, Russell Quirk will be in the studio. We'll run through some of the big stories of the day. But first, we'll talk to Alex Phillips about this shocking new statistic that foreigners are now responsible, foreign residents of this country, foreigners who are here, are now responsible for nearly a quarter of all our sex crimes. Comes to about 23%. So foreigners, not British people, who come here, abuse our hospitality by breaking our laws, by frankly committing sex crimes. That's great, isn't it? 23%, nearly a quarter of all sex crimes in this country are now committed by foreigners. There's something wrong there, isn't there? 03444991000. Alex Phillips and Russell Quirk next. Stay tuned.
Across the UK, on on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. In a little while, Russell Quirk will join me in the studio. But first, let's talk to Alex Phillips, who does terrific work. She fears that British women on the streets of Britain are at great risk from our foreign friends, from asylum seekers, from foreigners. And it looks like she's right. Let's go through the figures. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Hi, Kev.
Well, look, you've for long suspected as much, but now at last, through the magic of freedom of information, we have got confirmation from the Ministry of Justice that a massively disproportionate number of sex crimes are being committed by foreigners here. 9.3% of this population of this country are foreign nationals. It turns out that 23% of our sex crimes are committed by foreign nationals. That is disproportionate and extremely worrying. So, due to a freedom of information request by the Centre for Migration Control, that's Robert Bates, who you may know, he has established that the Ministry of Justice has confirmed 15% of sexual offences, including rape, were accounted for by foreign nationals between 21 and 23, so that's for 2 years, and another 8% was recorded as unknown nationalities. That means foreigners, so that's 23%. So just as you said, a kind of really alarmingly disproportionate number of sex crimes in the British Isles are committed by foreigners. Your thoughts?
Right, so first of all, let's put this in perspective. These are crimes that have been convicted. These are crimes that have been reported. And that's a vanishingly small amount. Now, I would venture a guess that actually, if this is a known suspect, if the rapist was known to the individual, they might be more compelled, perhaps, or feel like they've got more evidential basis or witness to report these things. And this doesn't, of course, account for harassment. This doesn't account for sexual assault. This is actually convicted rapes. And so, you know, would those statistics, were there a facility to gather all of the evidence on those other, perhaps lesser crimes, although they shouldn't be ignored? Would they tell a different story? I'm sure they would. But the thing is, what really gets stuck in my craw is the fact we need statistics to back up what women like me are saying. Why do we need to go and have some sort of data evidence, some mathematical, empirical proof that we're not liars and we're not xenophobes and we're not racists? It should stand to absolute common sense and reason that if men are coming from cultures where women are subjugated, where they have very misogynistic views, where women have to cover themselves from head to toe, where there isn't sort of sexual liberty and so on and so forth, and those men are then transplanted into a society where they're not integrated with women who are being told actually that empowerment is dressing as you want and having as many sexual partners as you want, that it's likely to happen. The likely response to that sort of cocktail is going to be these sorts of statistics. And what really bothers me is the fact that we're ignored unless you can actually come up with statistics and a graph to say, I'm not being racist. See, we've got the data now. It shouldn't be about that. It should be about women being able to say when men are coming from the Middle East or North Africa, where the treatment of women is massively different to the treatment of women here, it's affecting women here. That should stand to reason. That should be sensible. That should be something baked into immigration in this country. That should be baked into the reporting of crimes. Instead, the tendency is in the other direction. The tendency is to say, well, you know, we better not say anything because they're a migrant. We better not say anything because that could be Islamophobic. We better not say anything because that could be racist. We shouldn't have to be turning up, waving receipts in their face, and all the while, it is ignored. It is still shut down. It is still censored.
Trying to sum up, I know you've had your own experiences, how women are feeling walking the streets, and particularly of London these days. And also, I shouldn't ask two questions at once, but I'm going to do it. What the hell? You have for long called on the Ministry of Justice, and indeed our government generally, to start revealing these statistics. How many of which crimes are committed by which ethnic groups. So, for example, we're finding out from this Freedom of Information request that Afghans and Eritreans are more than 20 times more likely to account for sexual offence convictions than British citizens. So these are the kind of statistics that you've been asking our authorities to give out as a matter of course, but time and time again you've been told no, no, no. And you're convinced this is just to cover up awkward numbers here.
Of course it is, because like I was saying, Afghanistan, Eritrea, massively destabilised, violent societies where women are very evidentially repressed by men, assaulted by men, where rape is used as a weapon of war, where men can marry girls at the age of 9 years old. You honestly think they land on our shores and suddenly have some Damascene revolution where suddenly they kind of think Bonnie Blue is fighting for women's rights? I mean, you don't need to have statistics to tell somebody that this is going to be the situation. And what really bothers me is the fact that, again, it comes down to women are not being listened to. And I'm not saying this is a Me Too movement thing, but when it's women who are actually facing this on a daily basis, we need to be listened to. And yet again, it's another example of the government not wanting to face up to reality because they have created a screaming mess. It's the same with organised crime. A lot of organised crime in the United Kingdom is perpetrated by foreign gangs. When I say a lot, I mean about 90-odd% at this point. If you're talking about phone theft, if you're talking about shoplifting, if you're talking about people trafficking, if you're talking about the drugs trade, a lot now is being done by international syndicates who essentially, are making money. They come over to the UK opportunistically to perpetrate crime. We know this, and yet the doors remain open. And actually, when it comes to protecting women and protecting children in your society, that should be the wake-up call, because the minute you stop doing that, you're not a civilized society. You're about as good as the countries that these men are coming from, claiming asylum because their countries are rubbish. And we go, well, you better come in. Your country's really backwards and medieval and brutal and living in the dark ages. If you are going to let people in from these countries, and I look at Syria right now and what's going on there, why are we not taking the women? Why are we not taking the children? Why is it the young men who are coming across, the perpetrators by and large of all the horrible things that are happening in those countries? This isn't the sort of women and children in the lifeboats first scenario, is it?
No, it's not. Now, that's why you don't ask two questions at once, because everybody always forgets the first question. So I did say, no, you're quite entitled to do that. It's my fault. How do women feel, though, walking the streets of this country now, particularly London? I know you've had your own experiences. This is bad news, isn't it?
Yeah, it depends what streets you walk. If you're walking around the streets of some sort of lovely leafy suburb where you've got multi-million-pound houses and the demography is largely, rich, white English people, then you'll probably feel as safe as houses. You're going to feel all right. If you're walking the mean streets of somewhere where you find yourself in a minority, then you're probably going to have an experience a bit like what the Foreign Office would recommend you would have. If you then went to Eritrea, or if you went to Afghanistan, I'm pretty sure the government's advice to a woman going to Afghanistan would be probably don't walk around by yourself at night, because men are going to look on that in a pretty shabby way. You then have all that population in one particular district or one neighborhood or one, even one street of a neighborhood, then what you think is going to be different? So this is what I am saying. It's ludicrously simple. It is absolutely absurdly easy to realize that the culture in that country from which people are escaping, if it suddenly moves to this country, is going to be the same, unless there are massive government interventions, which means stop burying your blimmin' head in the sand and face up to them. If you're going to bring people in from these other cultures and these other countries and expect them to magically integrate as if fairy dust is sprinkled on their foreheads the minute they land on our shores, that's for the birds.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Now, Alex, strong and powerful words as always from you. I think it's quite important that we remind people you made an important film about this issue not so long ago. What's it called and where can people find it?
Yeah, well, it's called, I can't remember what it's called now, put me on the spot. It's called the Rape Epidemic of Britain, or Rape Epidemic of Europe, or something like that. Oh my God, I wish I could remember the title.
But it was made on the part of the New Culture Forum.
New Culture Forum, and it's really important that they take the credit for this. I voiced the documentary, I presented the documentary. They approached me because they knew that I was passionate about this subject, but they did the hard yards on gathering the research and putting it all together and funding it and making it happen. So it is important to watch the New Culture Forum on YouTube. You'll find it there, and it is an upsetting watch. You're going to be bombarded with statistics like these, even more eye-watering, because we look at statistics across Europe where this information is properly collated, and it needs to be a wake-up call.
Well, I've got some good information for you. Your film is called Immigration and the Rise in Rape, and it's on the New Culture Forum's website. We'll get the address and we'll give it out properly because it's important. Great to talk to you as always, Alex. Let's talk again soon. That's the great Alex Phillips, talk presenter who campaigns tirelessly on this issue. Your thoughts, 0344 499 1000. Russell Quirk, social and political commentator, and my talk presenter colleague will be in the studio after this break.
Thousands of people. I think, if my figures are correct, I think 1,900 people came in just last week alone. We don't know. Some people are not, registering. They're just going on the run. And who knows, they could be going into terrorist cells in the country and nobody in the country ever knows who these people are.
Yeah.
And that's the really scary thing. And this is what, the organization that we pay for, Prevent, is meant to prevent. And yet, it's just another attack waiting to happen.
It really is.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. He's in the studio. Russell Quirk. Hi, Russ.
Hello, good evening.
An eventful day. Well, let's get cracking because we've got a lot to get through. I'll get your thoughts on reform in just a little while, but I meant to cover this with Ben Habib, but to be honest with you, he's more... the Reform UK bust-up was more his thing. Let's talk about this guy. This Hamas fanatic, his name's Abdu Wadeh, filmed himself crossing the channel illegally on a small boat last Thursday, wafted into the country, no problem at all. Only after the Daily Mail or the Mail Online highlighted this did the authorities seem to get their backsides into gear, and they finally arrested him last night. The guy is an anti-Israel fanatic who runs a massive YouTube channel calling for the destruction, the death of all Jews and the destruction of Israel. He does the same on TikTok, makes a lot of money from all this. He's a professional anti-Semite who's been pictured with guns, machine guns, you name it. And he just wafted into the country. They found him last night and finally arrested him. But why wasn't he stopped at the border?
Well, yes, it shouldn't take a national newspaper to effectively be border force, should it? But the concern is, of course, when you've got 2,000 of these individuals coming over a week, and they are all of the same demographic, shall we say, how many are coming in that don't have YouTube channels and aren't on TikTok talking about and proposing the death and destruction of Jews? How many are coming over that we don't know about? I mean, is it beyond the pale, Kev, to assume that there's hundreds, if not thousands, of jihadis that have come across on those boats? I mean,
that's the point.
It's a fair assumption.
I mean, and if the Mail, good God bless it, hadn't picked up on this story, this guy would be wandering around the streets. He did. He came in on Thursday, part of 235 migrants who came in ever since last Saturday, not the one just gone, the one before. In 8 days, more than 2,000 migrants have come across the channel, hundreds every day.
Undocumented.
Undocumented. So Abdu Wadeh, who's apparently his real name is Mossab Al-Qassas, he's got 170,000 TikTok followers and 89,000 paying subscribers on YouTube. He is a violent member of Hamas's tyre burning unit, they're called. For one video, for example, he said, "Allah, kill them one by one and don't leave a single one." He's talking about Jewish people. Allah, destroy them completely, disperse them completely, and make the earth fall from under their feet. Now, the police caught up with him last night, but if it wasn't for the Mail, he'd be wandering around, wouldn't he? And you're right. How many, out of those 2,000 last week, how many more? How many more like him?
And we don't know. And do you remember, not that long ago, cast your mind back to the guy that came over on a boat with an intention, apparently, so he said, to kill Nigel Farage. The thing that gave it away was the fact that he had an AK-47 tattooed onto his face. He still got in. He still came into the country. Look, we may as well not have a border force, border farce, I think as they're affectionately known, or indeed a Home Office, or indeed a police force or a judiciary. I mean, this is just free reign. And the fact that these individuals think that they can literally do TikTok selfies on the way over, knowing generally that probably nothing's going to happen. I mean, you know what's going to happen to this guy, Abdu Vahadi, or whatever his name is? He's going to be deported. Guess when he's coming back? Next week.
Yeah,
he'll be straight back on a boat.
No doubt, unless they lock him up. But
for what?
He shouldn't. Well, he's an illegal terrorist, supporting an illegal prescribed terrorist organisation on record.
I suspect one of Keir Starmer's lawyer mates will get him off.
That is against the law, so they should
that
do
doesn't seem
it.
to make any difference.
They should do him for it, but that's not the point. The point is, if it wasn't for the Mail, this guy would be walking the streets, as you quite rightly say. Out of the 2,078 migrants who crossed the Channel since last Saturday week in 8 hectic days, how many more are like Abdu Wadeh? How many more?
Well,
how
Kev,
many more?
Can we call it as it is? Like you and I rehearsed a week or so ago on your show. This is an invasion. Not only is it an invasion in terms of the numbers, but in terms of the intent of some of these individuals coming here. I looked up earlier on, by the way, less people, fewer soldiers invaded Britain in 1066 than are now coming here on a pro rata basis every month.
Yeah, they came on small boats as well, didn't they?
They did. So we are being invaded, and I often get stick on social media when I say that, it's not an invasion, he's poor asylum seekers, you've got to look after them. No, we haven't. They're coming here often, not all, mostly, often, with malintent.
I'll tell you what we're going to discuss it in a little while. I'm not sure if you'll still be here. Let's have a look. Yeah, you will be. Yeah, good. Russell and I will be discussing fairly soon the fact that the BBC chairman, Samir Shah, whilst conceding that perhaps their Gaza documentary was a little out of line, perhaps a little bit too anti-Israel, a little bit pro-Palestine, maybe wasn't a great idea idea to have the host be the son of a Hamas member, a senior Hamas official. Samir Shah, the chairman, said, yeah, it was bad, dagger through the heart of the BBC's claim to be impartial, that ridiculous claim to be impartial. But he does say that we should reflect the view that many people have, that they're concerned about the migrant invasion, but we should remember that the majority of Brits support illegal migrants.
No, that
is the view from Planet BBC. Is Samir Shah right there? I mean, he's actually one of the better ones. He's saying, look, we can't just support that viewpoint, but I think he is informed by the view in Broadcasting House, and that is that the vast majority of British citizens support all these illegal migrants coming into the country. The vast majority of us.
He's been spending too much time with Gary Lineker.
Do you think that's true? Do you think that's true? Do you think the vast majority of British people support this ongoing invasion of migrants, of illegal migrants? They've been coming in at the rate of 260 a day for 8 days in a row. 8 days in a row, 260 a day. One day, I think it was about 579, which was yesterday week. 579, something like that. The highest number this year. In the past 8 days, the full total for this year has doubled. So there was something like 2,000 already. There are now way over 4,000. So we've had this ridiculous week where they've just piled on in and the government's doing nothing about it. Smash the gangs, smash the gangs. How many gangs have you smashed, Keir? Oh, I know, none whatsoever. What is the point of your gang smashing strategy? It doesn't work, does it? What are you really going to do about it? What should he do about it, folks? Let me know. 03444991000. It really is out of control, isn't it? So your thoughts on that? The BBC says most of us are in favour of all these migrants breaking into the country illegally. Do you think that's true? Are you in favour of it? And if you're not, what should we do about it? 03444991000. Is it time, as a lot of banner adverts in the national newspapers said yesterday, to suspend the licence fees? Stop giving the BBC all this money until it can guarantee us impartial coverage of the Middle East instead of this anti-Semitic horror they're foisting on us now. All of that next. Stay tuned.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm with Russell Quirk. Russell, let's talk about this. 2,078 migrants across the Channel illegally since Saturday, March the 1st. So that's in 8 days of constant boats ferrying them in, as I just said, at the rate of an average 260 every 24 hours. By the way, our Saturday just gone 2 days ago, and one migrant died of a heart attack in one of the boats. So let's not forget these constant journeys that our government basically sanctions, basically allows, are often fatal. I heard Dover's Labour MP, Mike Tapp, talking to Peter Cardwell over the weekend. He said that two-tier and Calamity Cooper's smash the gangs strategy will take time. No, Mike, as is being proved on a daily basis, no amount of time will make this work. It simply won't work. That's it, isn't it? We have got this, the invasion now, the weather's all right, is going to get worse and worse and worse. 2,000 in a week, more than 2,000 a week. We are fairly soon going to get 3,000 in a week, and it's all because our government has no deterrent for them whatsoever. Quite the reverse. We've got lots and lots of incentives. We'll talk about that in just a second. But your thoughts on 2,078 migrants crossing the Channel illegally in 8 days, and the government doing the square root of damn all about it?
It reminds me that when this government was seeking to get elected in their campaign during May and June and July last year, and their theme was things can only get better. Do you remember they even had a tune that played out, things can only get better.
Get rid of the better, worse, I think is what we're talking about. Yeah.
And the likes of you and me and Mike and Julia and Jeremy, probably just us, was saying, hang on a sec, the Labour Party, particularly when they've been in government, do not exactly have a great track record when it comes to a number of things, economy notwithstanding, but particularly when it comes to immigration. We all forecast, we all said that this would be an immigration disaster, and it would be even worse than under the tenure of the likes of Theresa May, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. And I'm afraid, and I hate to say genuinely, that we were absolutely right. I'd love to hear from any Labour voters that voted Labour thinking that Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper were being honest about the fact that they were going to smash the gangs and stop this tide of illegal and legal migration, and that are still happy with the Labour government. Now, I know Keir Starmer and others and the party itself have tanked in the polls, but can there be anybody out there genuinely that, you know, thinks that the Labour vote was a good vote given the economy and the state of migration, the state of crime? Look, as you just rehearsed with Alex Phillips, I mean, this could not be worse.
No, it's a disaster, and this government has clearly set itself up as the welcoming committee for any illegal migrant who wants to come here. I can't believe they actually believe that this nonsense about smashing the gangs and their very expensive border security command, who only recently they gave £175 million worth of high-tech equipment to find the gangs and smash them. No results so far. Plus, you've got Martin Hewitt, the boss, is on £200,000 a year.
We haven't heard from him since about September.
The first thing he said was that smashing the gangs won't work. It won't stop the migrants. They've got to stop the migrants.
Well, but we haven't heard from him since. Let me just read you the bio of Mike Tapp that you were just talking about.
Oh, the Labour MP who says it'll take time.
No, well, the Labour MP for Dover, right? So at the entry point.
That's the front line.
The entry point for this invasion. I mean, it's our kind of D-Day, isn't it? It's Normandy all over again. He's the Labour MP, he says, championing Dover and Deal and serving the nation. Well, I'd like to know from you, Mike Tapp, what exactly are you championing, apart from crass illegal immigration? He's not championing the protection of Britain, is he? He's not championing the people of Dover, the council taxpayers, the residents that have lived there for years and years and years. He's doing absolutely nothing. And the fact that he sits there saying, oh, yeah, it will take a little while, well, that's not what they said in the run-up to the election, is it? They were going to smash the gangs immediately and stop the problem?
Yeah, well, considering they came into power on July the 5th, set up the Border Security Command immediately. It's supposed to have a number of officers working for it now. It's got a £200,000 a year boss. It's got £175 million worth of high-tech, cutting-edge equipment to find all these. Considering that it hasn't caught a single, never mind a gang, it hasn't caught a single people smuggler yet, let alone a people smuggling gang. When Mike Tapp, the frontline MP for Dover, says it'll take some time, it's going to take about a zillion years at that rate. It will take... There is no way this will ever work. Absolutely absurd. Stop the migrants and stop the boats, then the people smuggling gangs won't have any customers. See? Quite simple. They're doing it the wrong way round. If you stop the migrants, then the people smuggling gangs will cease to exist because they have, to use my French, no raison d'etre, no reason to be.
And then stop the incentives, which brings us nicely, I guess.
Yeah, let's talk about this amazing story. Britain, it emerges, over the past 5 years, has spent on something called asylum seeker support. This is basically us being kind to migrants. This is Britain being nice to these people who break into our country illegally and then claim the right to stay. These asylum seekers. So this is something called asylum seeker support. So after they've broken into our country illegally, and we've put them in a 4-star hotel and given them £43 a week, given them free food, free doctors, free dentists, free lawyers to fight their case to stay. After we've done all that, we then spend money on, for example, for them to enjoy trips to the zoo, tennis lessons, visits to football stadiums, days out, language lessons and friendship services. I have no idea what that is. If you do know what it is, please let me know. 03444991000. Anyway, this comprises about 200 government and local council schemes, Be Kind schemes. So it's government and local councils got 200 of these asylum seeker support schemes. That's just us being nice to these people who have illegally broken into our country. And guess how much money we have spent on asylum seeker support, trips to the zoo, football stadium, tennis lessons, all of that. Guess how much we spent all that in 5 years? Well, it's staggering.
It's unbelievable.
It's staggering. It's £6.6 billion. £6.6 billion on free gifts for people who broke into our country. Would you say this country's going a bit mad, Russell?
Well, I would suggest that we might be a bit of a soft touch. This might be yet another 6.6 billion reasons why we have 2,000 people a week coming over here illegally. And my question is, on the basis that this 6.6 billion is only over the last 5 years, so it's about
only
billion and a half, I'm being sarcastic, billion and a half a year over the last 5 years, which is way more than the winter fuel allowance for our pensioners that have paid into the system for years and years and years, law-abiding, hard-working, proper people, born here, grafted here, and now expect to be looked after by the government, because that's, after all, don't forget, that's all that governments are supposed to do, protect the public. So we're giving more money to asylum seeker tennis lessons than we are to stop pensioners freezing to death.
Yeah, and going back to what you quite rightly pointing out earlier, what we've got to ask ourselves, folks, is how many of these people getting free tennis lessons or enjoyable trips to the zoo or the local football stadium for tours or whatever, how many of these people are like our friend from Palestine, the one who broke into the country last Thursday and turns out to be a terrorist fanatic? How many of these people having a look round Anfield or going to London Zoo or having tennis lessons at our expense, £6.6 billion, how many of them are terrorists? How many of them are criminals? How many of them are sex criminals? We just heard it is now official that nearly a quarter of our sex crimes are being committed by foreigners. How many of them got free tennis lessons before they turned to rape? ask yourself that? Ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, but you can. I mean, someone cleverer than me and you, perhaps, at maths can probably work this out.
Not difficult in my case.
Yeah, no, but can probably work this out in a few minutes. Wouldn't it be good to hear from someone that says, OK, well, on the basis that 2,000 people a week are coming in and there being a greater propensity for sex and violence crimes committed by certain people from certain countries, those 2,000 people coming in every week means that the increase in crimes, not just the crime rate, but actual crimes against people on a violent and a sexual basis, on a weekly basis, we are literally inviting in criminals to commit crimes against us at the basis, on the rate of what, I don't know, maybe it's an extra 50, 100 crimes a week on the basis of the ratio of that higher propensity to commit crime based on those extra people coming into Britain. We are literally not just rolling out the red carpet, we are literally rolling out a red carpet and inviting people to come here and to hurt us and to commit sexual crimes against us.
Well, this isn't far from where you live, I do believe. Wethersfield, the asylum seeker.
I told you I was there 2 weekends ago.
You were there telling me
that
the entire village is infested with these migrants
wandering around like zombies.
Yeah, well, they can't work. They're mostly young men. That is a recipe for disaster. Anyway, talking about these, what do they call them? These asylum seeker support services. One contract, which was to do with the Wethersfield Asylum accommodation site. Arrivals there were greeted with £20,620 worth of sports coaches and equipment for activities such as volleyball, tennis and athletics 4 times a day, 3 times a week. It's like a holiday camp.
Well, it literally is. I mean, it is a camp. It's an ex-RAF base. But you know that the number, I think I mentioned this last week, but for those that weren't listening, the number of asylum seekers now at that camp outnumber the number of villagers in Wethersfield itself. So, to be clear, more asylum seekers in Wethersfield than actual villagers that live there legitimately.
Unbelievable. Listen, before we go to break, let's talk about the BBC, then we can concentrate on Ofgem afterwards. Well, as I alluded to earlier, the chairman of the BBC, Samir Shah, who sat last week before the Culture and Sport Committee with Tim Davie, the Director General, looking all sheepish and shamefaced. Samir Shah, somewhere near, dangerously near planet Earth for the BBC, him saying the BBC ignores the views of the public because it's full of woke liberals. He also says, strangely, that Match of the Day needs less football. OK, Samir, nice point. No, but what he also said is, we're never going to serve the entire population unless we become more representative of the entire population. We need more working class northerners. The BBC is always saying stuff like this. What it actually means when they say this, we mean we need more working class northerners who are very clever and got into Oxford or Cambridge.
Yeah.
But mainly when we check with our intake of graduate trainees that we take every year, what we're looking for is that they went to Oxford or Cambridge and prior to that Eton or Harrow. That's what the BBC's looking for. But it does let the odd working class genius who went to Oxford or Cambridge slip through the net. So we hear this claptrap all the time. The BBC is elitist. It never employs working class people. Doesn't employ anybody who hasn't got like a degree from Oxford or Cambridge, maybe just about Durham, and certainly doesn't employ anybody who didn't go to public school. It's an elitist organisation. We know this. So when he says, we've got to cater for everybody, well, they never really will. And of course, who they don't cater for is people who worry about migrants. So in this range of interviews that Samir Shah's giving over the weekend, he says that we need to reflect all views, including people who are concerned about all these migrants coming over. But then he says that the majority of Brits, of course, support migrants, support illegal.
Which is why their narrative
it's not true, is it?
But if they believe that the majority of people favour an influx of undocumented migrants, if they believe that the majority of people favour Palestine and indeed, as an extreme, the Hamas element massacring Jews on October the 7th, well, then that will be why their narrative is what their narrative is. The irony with the BBC being so absolutely obsessed with diversity, which they think is diversity of religion, colour, race, creed, is that they are the most undiverse organisation on the planet on the basis that what they look for is politics that looks, sounds and feels a lot like what is there already. So diversity needs to start extending to, you know, maybe a few Tory voters, maybe a few Reform voters. But we know from the demographic of the people, the journalists at the BBC, almost entirely, and things like the Question Time audience, that it's just left-leaning woke nonsense. And that's why people are switching off the BBC and stopping to pay their licences left, right and centre, and why great institutions like Doctor Who have been flushed down the toilet of wokeism.
Mind you, it's been flushed down the toilet for about 20 years now, but you're quite right, it's woke central, Doctor Who. It's supposed to be a kids' show. It's just full of all this kind of identity politics.
Asking aliens what their pronouns are.
Yeah, asking aliens what their pronouns are, like lizards who are lesbians, you know.
Lenny the lesbian lizard.
Just leave them as lizards. They don't need to be lesbian lizards, you know. But welcome to Doctor Who. But also the other problem, of course, with the BBC, Julia Hartley-Brewer comes right out and says this. I respect her courage and I think her backer. She says the BBC has turned, the news department, the journalists have turned into an anti-Semitic organisation. Now, over the weekend, I don't know if you saw the national newspapers, but there were these huge full-page banner adverts paid for by the campaign against anti-Semitism, which said that because of this documentary, Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone, that starred the son of a senior Hamas official, a 13-year-old boy, the BBC viewers didn't know about this, hence they've had to pull the documentary down, apologise, admit serious flaws. But what the Campaign for Anti-Semitism is saying, well, this means, without a shadow of a doubt, and they're right, money from us, licence fee payers, BBC licence fee payers, has ended up in the pockets of Hamas. BBC licence fee money has gone to Hamas. That is extremely serious.
Well, it's also, it should be, I mean, I thought it was, a criminal offence to fund directly or even indirectly.
Well, that's why the police are considering
a terrorist organisation. So, and I think the BBC have admitted that they or the production company knew about money changing hands, so they are banged.
790 quid, they admit, went to this kid's sister.
And let's go back to October the 7th, you know, a year and a bit ago, when, you know, we were all perplexed, angry, to say the least, at the BBC for spending weeks without actually labelling Hamas as a terrorist organisation.
Well,
they still don't.
They still don't.
So that's
they're now calling them resistance.
So that's the
resistance
form.
Fight.
That's the form. So, you know, if it looks like they're anti-Semitic and it smells like they're anti-Semitic, they probably are anti-Semitic.
Yeah, why won't they call Hamas what they are? The Hamas are a prescribed, forbidden terrorist organisation. The government here, the British government, the Labour government, has prescribed them, has said they're a forbidden organisation. All over the world, they're a forbidden organisation. Why can't the BBC bring itself to say that? You don't necessarily have to hitch your wagon to that sentiment, but you could repeat the fact that Hamas is a forbidden organisation. It's illegal in Britain. And what does the BBC call them? Resistance fighters.
And the central tenet, of
resistance fighters.
Central tenet.
Baby rapers is what they are, if you want to know.
And the central tenet of the BBC, of course, let's go back to its roots, is that it should be an unbiased, information-giving news organisation. How on earth can anyone, Tim Davie or anybody else, defend the BBC in being unbiased when they will not describe a terrorist organisation that is officially a terrorist organisation as such? That is the very definition of bias, isn't it?
Yeah. Talking of money, just before we move on, the BBC, it emerges, has been advertising for a highly paid job, £125,000 a year. This is the all-important, check this out, I'm quoting, Head of Diversity and Belonging. Any idea what that is? Belonging to what? Hamas?
Yes. belonging to terrorist organisations, seemingly. Look, you know,
you don't know, do you? I don't know either.
No, but the recurring issue here is they can do this stuff, right? Because they're not accountable. It's the word we use all the time. If you are an organisation, private, public or otherwise, that is not accountable to anybody at all, because you don't really care if people turn the telly off. You don't really care if people stop paying the licence fee, because you're not accountable yourself to the consequences of that P&L effect. You know, Tim Davie and, you know, all of the editors, all of the newsreaders, nobody is accountable. When do we ever hear of anyone getting fired by the BBC for doing something wrong? Despite all of the transgressions that we've seen over years and decades at the BBC, no one ever gets fired.
Yeah, Deborah Turner's the head of news, the chief executive of news, I think may be in deep trouble over this Gaza documentary. I don't like calling for people to get sacked. It's cliched and I think a bit pathetic. But sometimes you get these situations that are so serious that the public deserve some kind of gesture. Now, this is our TV channel, this is our broadcaster, we paid for it, and we deserve someone to be sacked for this, and I think it may have to be Deborah Turner.
But you know what will happen? She won't be sacked. She'll leave with 3 years' money.
Well,
she'll resign.
Oh yeah, no, she'll leave with loads of money, even if they sack her.
Our money.
That's what the BBC do. But they're giving loads of money to Hamas. They're giving £125,000 to the head of Belonging. What do you think of how the BBC is spending your money, your 170 quid a year licence fee? As Russell said, it's outrageous. None of these people, so many people at the BBC, you know, they get there straight from Oxford or Cambridge, having been to Eton. They're about 22 years old, and then about 45 years later, they're still there waffling on like John Simpson or something with their highfalutin, snobbish, you know, kind of upper class view of the world. They're still doing it, and they know nothing of the world because they've never worked for a business that has to account for itself. So your thoughts, please, on what the BBC's doing with your money, giving it to Hamas and spending it on a head of Belonging. 03444991000. When we come back, we're going to talk about the energy watchdog, Ofgem. Now, Ofgem's job is to sort of protect us, the British customers, from the vicissitudes of, you know, fluctuating, volatile energy prices, you know, to keep our prices fairly calm, to keep them down. How do you think Ofgem is doing? Well, they obviously think they're doing a great job because they've given themselves £5 million, more than £5 million worth of bonuses. So brilliant is the job they've been doing, keeping your bills down. They're very happy with themselves. Are you happy with them? 03444991000. That next. Stay tuned.
Over 100 schools could be forced to close because of Labour's ridiculous VAT on private schools. We also know now that that many parents have had to move their children into the state school system. Have you had any more interaction with the Secretary of State?
No. So she did say she would come and visit us. Of course, she hasn't been to see us. But it's not just us that matter. You know, she met with some school leaders. They have been asking for the same things that I am asking for. She has ignored all of us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Before we get to Ofgem giving themselves £5 million worth of bonuses, no one quite knows why. Their boss, their chief executive, a guy called Jonathan Brearley, earns £200,000 a year. No one knows why. Anyway, before we get to that, I wanted to just alert you to this story. One of West Streeting's top aides, he's a Labour councillor, I think embarking in East London. His name is Sam Gold. He's 33. He has pleaded guilty to indecent exposure. The Health Secretary of West Streeting says he's horrified. Basically exposed his genitals intending that someone would see them and be caused alarm or distress. That's what he's admitted to. The Health Secretary of West Streeting said he was shocked and horrified. I'm shocked and horrified by this news, and my heart goes out to the victims of these totally abhorrent acts. No one should have to endure this behaviour, and I'm grateful to the police for taking swift action. A disciplinary process has been underway since I was made aware of this arrest at the weekend, and following his guilty plea, I am calling for him to resign as a Redbridge councillor immediately. He has abused my trust, the trust of my team and the trust of my constituents, and must now accept the consequences of his actions. Now, I might be being a little unfair, but maybe, Wes, you should have a bit more of a think about the people you put into your top team. I'm not sure whether this guy, Sam Gould, has got the moral backbone that you might have been looking for.
I have genuinely lost count of the number of senior Labour people, whether it's MPs in particular, councillors now, advisors, people in WhatsApp groups and so on, that have had to fall on their sword, no pun intended by the way, as a consequence of their indiscretion. Sorry, couldn't resist that.
Fall on their metal swords.
Samara's finger hovering over the dump button. No, that have had to leave, resign or be fired because of indiscretions. I mean, what is it with this Labour lot? Now, I know the Tories aren't particularly good, but, I mean, there has just been a kind of catalogue of disasters and embarrassments. I mean, you talk about West Streeting not having much judgment. I mean, Keir Starmer, I think, haven't we gone through about 6 or 7 ministers since July?
Yes, indeed. I'll guarantee you one thing about this guy, Sam Gould, 33 years old.
He's a councillor as well.
He looks like a little jerk. He really does. If you met him, I guarantee, and then you found out that he's been done for indecent exposure,
that figures.
I guarantee you to go, yeah, I'm not surprised.
Makes sense.
I'll guarantee you it. I'll guarantee you it. And perhaps...
it's almost like that 14 years in opposition didn't make them all ready for government, isn't it?
Yeah, and West Streeting perhaps should have been a little bit more careful about who he has in his top team. Well, he's reacting well to it now, but this is a massive embarrassment.
When you promote your mates and allow people into jobs that lie on their CVs and pretend they're solicitors and so on and so on and so on, this is what happens, isn't it?
So when West Streeting said he had some flash ideas for mending the broken NHS, now we know what he's talking about. Let's quickly talk about Ofgem. That is the watchdog, the sort of semi-government watchdog that looks after energy prices for us. Its real job is to sort of protect the British consumer from the vicissitudes of the national, international, volatile energy price market. So the price of energy, of electricity and gas, soaring all the time. Ofgem's Ofgem is supposed to keep us sort of vaguely on the straight and narrow. I would contend they haven't been doing a particularly good job, but it turns out that over the last year they've given themselves £1.5 million worth of pay rises, and over the last 5 years, Russell, they've given themselves £5.5 million in bonuses, and the boss of the whole operation, Jonathan Brearley, earns £200,000 a year. They're happy with their performance. I don't think anyone else is.
Well, I'm not, and I've got some things to tell you, actually, that will be new news, potentially. So, first of all, I looked up what the definition of Ofgem is, and it is this. The Office of Gas and Electricity Markets is responsible for, get this, regulating the energy industry. Well, it's not doing that, is it? No. And its purpose, its sole purpose, the only reason it exists is, I quote, to protect consumers. Don't think they're doing that very well, and to ensure a secure energy supply and promote fair competition. Well, they've failed in that, haven't they? But listen to this as well. You talk about that 5-year period. The typical bill now, because we've now seen 3 increases in the energy cost cap since Labour came into power, they've done literally nothing about it. The typical bill under the April to June 2025 price cap, Kev, will be 52% higher than it was in winter 21-22. Yeah. So they've got a bonus for performance, even though the consumer, particularly pensioners and those on low pay, are having to pay 52% more than they were 4 years ago.
And what do we know about Mr. Brearley? £200,000 a year.
Well, Mr. Brearley's quite interesting. Guess who he used to work for? I know you know, but...
Well, no, I'm acting like I don't in the audience. Yeah, I do
Only because you're very smart.
Only because Russell just told me.
All right, OK.
But tell the folks at home...
Hey, audience, guess who Jonathan Brearley used to work for? And all will be revealed as to why this is such a hapless mess. He worked for, drumroll, Tony Blair.
Oh, what a surprise.
Hey, guess what else he did? A few years ago, Jonathan Brearley, now the CEO of Ofgem, was the person responsible for setting up, guess what? The Office of Climate Change.
Of course he was.
Sums it up.
So this office, the Ofgem office, paid themselves £5.5 million bonuses, special performance bonuses since the last 5 years, and we are now paying the highest energy bills in the entire world. Our bills are the highest in the entire world. So call me controversial, but I would say that Jonathan Brearley and his merry men and women at Ofgem are not doing a very good job at all. And they certainly do not warrant £5.5 million worth of pay bonuses, do they?
Can I just ask a quick question? How bad do they have to perform to not get their bonus?
I don't know. I don't know. You let me know, folks. What do you think of that? 0344 499 1000. Big thank you to Russell Quirk for another brilliant performance. He'll be back next Monday. And next up, we're going to Tel Aviv live to talk to Isabel Oakeshott, our international editor, who is on the scene in Israel reporting. That next, stay tuned.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Well, we're going to get the scene from the Middle East where I would say the Gaza ceasefire, the putative peace is in a certain amount of trouble, to say the least. They're talking about airstrikes happening again, and which has upset Hamas, and Israel yesterday pledged to cut off the electricity supply to Gaza. So all is not well in terms of the peace process there. Now, over there on the scene, or near enough anyway, in Israel, in Tel Aviv, is Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. So let's get the latest from her. Welcome to the show, Isabel.
Good evening, Kevin. And it's a pretty somber mood here, I would say. There's a general sense that this whole operation by the Israelis is just not really succeeding. One very well-placed follower of events went so far as to say we're not much further on than we were in October. Still said many hostages to be released. They think 24 that are still alive, and sadly many, about the same number again, of bodies to be returned, and no sign of that happening. And the mood is very much that Israel is going to have to go back in, and go back in hard. But nobody seems to know how this will end. You know, this is what's on everybody's minds here. Number one, get the hostages back. But the hostages are the only leverage that Hamas really has. What else have they actually got? So, you know, they are holding on to those hostages because once they're returned, then, well, what does Hamas really have to play for? After all, 80% of the Gaza Strip has basically been flattened.
And has Israel come through on its threat to cut electricity off from Gaza?
I believe so, but that doesn't mean that Gaza is in some kind of blackout, because there's only actually, as I understand it, one power line that has been operational since the October the 7th attacks, and that power line may have been cut off, but there are a lot of generators there, and I believe they've got enough for several weeks worth of power. The key concern is the impact of cutting that main power supply on the desalination plants, and whether that'll actually leave civilians in Gaza without clean water, with all the devastating kind of health implications that will have. I think that is considered a, you know, fairly significant threat to the civilians there.
And what's the mood in Israel? I believe that, you know, support for Netanyahu, while still there, is not particularly enthusiastic and maybe fading. Then you've got Donald Trump, who's saying, you know, release the hostages or there will be hell to pay. As you say, the spectre of war re-emerging, rising again. The people of Israel must be fairly despondent, aren't they? And what's their mood?
Oh, yeah, I mean, they absolutely are. The mood is quite gloomy, I would say. There's in terms of Netanyahu, I mean, latest polling in Israel suggests 73% of people, nearly 3/4 of people, think Netanyahu should step down. You know, they've lost confidence really in this leader. However, there is a new military chief of staff who is considered to be a lot more sort of aggressive than the last one. So that's raised some hopes. People are not happy at all at the spectre of any significant figure from Trump's administration negotiating direct with Hamas. That's simply not the done thing in the US or in the UK. You don't negotiate with terrorists. It feels a bit like what we did, you know, after the Taliban came back in. You know, countries started like trying to talk to the Taliban. It really hasn't gone down well at all here. And I think in Washington tonight there's some backpedaling on that. I think that people are just getting a bit desperate. The whole thing, it just dominates everything and everywhere you go. Every street has these pictures of the hostages, every building, every car, with the yellow ribbons. It's everywhere, omnipresent. And, until those hostages, the last one is out, this is very unfinished business. But Hamas is asking for the release of all Palestinian prisoners. How can that happen? Because then that creates a whole other national security threat.
So what we've got here really is sort of stalemate, haven't we? And the sort of build-up of the return to war. Is that the feeling that inevitably, fairly soon, the bombing's going to restart, the shooting's going to restart? Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And people are frustrated. The Israelis kind of want it to start again because they think that that's the only way that we can actually move the situation forward. Not that anyone wants never-ending war, but they feel that this stalemate, if that's what we could call it, isn't actually bringing the hostages home, which is their number one ask. As for what comes after that, how, if the hostages are returned, how does any kind of governance get restored in Gaza? No one has an answer to that. They just say it can't involve Hamas. It has to be some kind of what they call a technical government or technocrat government. So, basically run by a bunch of officials. Who are those officials going to be, and how can it be certain that they're not linked to the wrong kind of people?
And has the sort of stylized release of these hostages over the past few weeks, of course, the most recent ones proving that too many of these hostages are no longer alive. So we've got the grim spectacle of coffins coming out. But and then the doubt as to who was in the damn things, which is even worse. Yeah. But has counterintuitively the process of releasing the hostages but not releasing all of them, if anything, made the tension, made the situation worse?
Well, I just think it's just all been so tremendously long drawn out, hasn't it? And people just feel that, what has it all come down to? Of course, for those that have got their loved ones back, deeply traumatized though they must be, those that were lucky enough to get out alive, it's obviously better than those who are still waiting. But some of the families who are most proactively campaigning for the return of other hostages are those who've already got their loved ones back, because they understand how awful it is and what those poor people in captivity are going through. So it's a pretty desperate situation still. And it just, the conversations that you have, even with people in the most expert position, don't seem to give any answers. I've spoken to people today in very senior diplomatic positions here, and it's, they talk about, well, it's all, we've got to find a diplomatic solution. I suppose they would say that because they're diplomats. But what kind of diplomacy can you have with a terror organization whose mission is to actually destroy Israel?
Yeah, exactly right. It's a very difficult situation, to say the least, and it looks pretty grim. Looks like the war's going to start again, which is bad news. Talking of wars, we're going to go to break now, Isabel, but we're going to talk about that other war, the Ukraine war, and the talks going on as we speak, almost, in Saudi Arabia. Zelensky's arrived, the Americans are there, the Ukrainians are there. This is another chapter in Donald Trump's book of peace. We'll talk about that when we come back.
Over 100 schools could be forced to close because of Labour's ridiculous VAT on private schools. We also know now that that many parents have had to move their children into the state school system. Have you had any more interaction with the Secretary of State?
No. So she did say she would come and visit us. Of course, she hasn't been to see us. But it's not just us that matter. You know, she met with some school leaders. They have been asking for the same things that I am asking for. She has ignored all of us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm still talking to Talk's international editor Isabel Oakeshott, who's over there in Israel, in Tel Aviv. But Isabel, let's talk about Saudi Arabia, where the Ukrainians and the Americans, including Zelensky, have gathered to talking about peace. I guess that's how you'd put it. It looks as if Trump has upped the ante a bit. He still wants this rare earth mineral deal to sort of share the mineral wealth of Ukraine, with America sort of helping to drill for all those valuable materials. He still wants that, but he's also now saying that Zelensky, who's arrived, as I say, in Saudi Arabia, is going to have to accept ceding territory to Russia, probably the territory it's already gained in this war. And he's also demanding now, as part of this package, Zelensky calls an election which may well remove him from the office of President of Ukraine. So he's upped the ante. What do you think is going to happen in Saudi Arabia?
Well, it's fascinating that Saudi is playing this role as a sort of mediator in what looks an increasingly dismal potential peace deal from the Ukrainian side of things. They've been meeting in Jeddah today. The meeting is with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman bin it's been a long day. Prince Mohammed bin Salman, otherwise generally known as MBS, is what we all
You expected
call
me to finish that, weren't you?
Yeah, I did. I just called him MBS.
You're on your own. But anyway, point taken. Point taken.
So, yes, Trump is basically, as you say, upping the ante. Zelensky's got nowhere to turn on this. The proposal that's being floated is some kind of limited ceasefire. And if Trump hears what he wants to hear, then the suggestion is that the US will restore military intelligence sharing, which is very important to the Ukrainians. And that, of course, will only happen with these strings attached. You know, if Trump hears the right noises on this minerals deal, which I'm sure he's going to, because certainly Zelensky is not going to want any repeat of the disastrous scene in the Oval Office whenever it was, a week ago.
Exactly right. Now, as you say, America's already withdrawn military aid to Ukraine, probably more significant than that. Subsequent to the withdrawing of military aid, it withdrew towards the end of last week all intelligence assistance to Ukraine, which apparently basically renders all the American missiles that Ukraine has at the forefront of its armaments useless. They can't fire them. Meanwhile, Elon Musk is saying that he's removing from them the ability to use the Starlink communications system. So if you add that to the fact they've got no military intelligence from America, Elon Musk points out that really, at the moment, as things stand right now, Ukraine basically does not have any way to defend itself against Russia because America has pulled the rug out from underneath its feet.
I think it's a bit more brutal than the rug, isn't it? They've basically cut Ukraine off at the knees, you know, and even it's probably generous. I mean, we've already seen a remarkable change in rhetoric, you know, from the bullish, defiant Zelensky in the Oval Office to a couple of days later, yeah, that didn't go so well. Of course, I don't want to upset the Americans, and I'm terribly grateful, and yeah, let's do what it takes to get this back on track again. Why? Because pragmatically, he's got absolutely nowhere to go, and I don't want to be flippant about this at all. I mean, the implications are, of course, enormous. I think, today there was talk of Ukraine may not survive. That's the kind of rhetoric coming out of the White House. And as far as Zelensky's concerned, ceding any territory has been a complete no-go. That's anathema up until now. And I think he's going to have to do it. There are those who say in defense and foreign policy circles that basically behind the scenes a deal has already been done. And it's not a deal that looks good for Ukraine.
Yeah, and of course, over the weekend, there's been the coalition of the willing, Starmer and the Europeans meeting with a view to kind of stepping into the breach, becoming the new America. Suddenly they can raise, I think it's 615 billion euros for corporate defence of the EU and the European continent and put that in towards defending Ukraine. So in other words, this suggestion that the EU and Britain will go it alone to back Zelensky against Putin without American assistance. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that unless America continues to support Ukraine, Ukraine has to do a peace deal. And given that at the moment Ukraine is not being supported by America in any way whatsoever, that peace deal may be quite close, do you think?
I think so. Events are moving extremely fast, aren't they? To have all these international talks today involving multiple world players. Trump's not messing around here. We've seen that already. It's going at each step, it's going further in his direction. And hopefully there will be a resolution, just as we were saying, because Ukraine can't continue this on their own. And as for Keir Starmer leading a coalition of the willing, a coalition of the willing without any shillings, they don't have the resources or the structure in which to make this happen. You and I spoke about this when it was first mooted, and I keep coming back to the point: under what command? What is the mission and who is commanding this thing? Because each and every time you ask that question, it comes back to a NATO command, and that's not going to be in any way acceptable to anybody.
Yeah, and I think, he says boots on the ground, we'll put boots on the ground to keep the peace in Ukraine. And as you suggested, Isabel, what boots? We just haven't got very many army boots to do this. So he's making bold and brave pledges with our severely defeated or depleted military. Yeah, I said defeated there, but they're so depleted they could easily be defeated. That's what we've got to face up to. So I don't know what the hell Starmer thinks he's on about, but what we're getting from our political journalists, the ones who follow him around the world on his many travels, is they want to kind of play up the fact that Britain is playing a central role in all of this because it makes a better story for them. But I don't think we are. I just, the last time Starmer got deeply involved was to say, I can assure you that American support for Ukraine will remain. About 6 hours later, the following morning, Donald Trump said, I am removing all military aid from Ukraine. Subsequent to that, Starmer said, I think that support, in essence, will still remain. Subsequent to that, Donald Trump announces, there goes the intelligence information too. They're not getting any more of that. So Keir Starmer has no idea what Donald Trump's going to do next. Keir Starmer does not have the ear of the American president. I suggest the American president thinks about Keir Starmer exactly the same as he thinks about all those other EU losers, that he's dysfunctional, weak and woke.
Well, I would think that's a pretty good bet. I mean, when you said Keir Starmer doesn't know what President Trump is going to do next, I'm not sure any of us really know.
Well, I accept that. That's a fair point, yes.
None of us know what he's going to do next. But, this latest crisis has played out rather better for Keir Starmer in perception terms, amongst British voters than one might have thought. Let's put it this way. He hasn't completely screwed it up, has he? He's looked okay in the last couple of weeks, but is it any more than looking okay?
He's spun it all right. He's done quite a good spin job. I think he's been about as central to this peace process as I have. Not at all.
Well, quite, and perhaps as central as I have, not being able to remember MBS's full name late at night in Israel. But yeah, absolutely. Look, it's worked for him as a spin operation. Labour's had a little bit of a bump in the polls in the UK, not much to write home about. I don't think it's going to deliver lasting dividends for our failing Prime Minister, but he desperately needed it, didn't he? He still needs a good war. But I don't think this is going to be one that actually delivers for him in the long term, because hopefully we're not going to have it.
Hopefully not. Very last point, got to ask you, because, you and I were talking about it last weekend. The Reform UK situation, it's still pretty heated. They're still hurling grenades at each other,
Well, I think there's actually been, I wouldn't say there's been a ceasefire within Reform quite yet, but I would say that there's not grenades going in both directions at this point, and that the Reform Party leadership really does want to move on now, not least because there is a very important by-election now. We know it's going to happen after Mike Amesbury, that Labour puncher, has said he's stepping down, and so they've just got to focus on that because they've got to try and win it. Yeah, they've got to get rid of pull a veil over what's been happening in the last few days. Excellent to talk to you, Isabel. Let's get you on again very soon. That's Isabel Oakeshott over there in Israel. When we come back, Kinsey Schofield in Los Angeles.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Well, it's time now to talk about Meghan. She had quite a week, didn't she, last week? And there was that terrible show with Mud Megan, which only came in at number 6 in the Netflix charts. Not very good for a first week. It's now, we hear, plummeting out of the top 10. So it is descending fast. Now, we finally we learned over the weekend, to our astonishment, that there will be a second series. Don't get too excited, folks. When they filmed the first series, they filmed the second at the same time. Old technique. That means you've got a whole series ready of very, very cheap television, which Netflix will probably just chuck out there. I don't think they're excited by it, to say the least. So don't read anything into that, because Megan was acting like, oh, look, I've just got the great news. My series, With Love Megan, has been so successful that Netflix are announcing that they're going to make a second series. No, they've already made it. And they always were going to screen it. And finally now, it looks like Netflix might be the last to have realised, but they're picking up on these universally bad reviews. The critics panned it. The public were furious. The public hated it, particularly kids on TikTok. Everybody hated this. The only people who didn't hate it were Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, as far as I can work out. But we're now learning that actually, to their credit, Netflix are very worried about the reviews and very worried about the lack of success of this programme. That is the truth. That this series, the first series, everybody hates it because it's so boring, it's so irrelevant, it's so pointless. Some ridiculous woman going around saying, here's a recipe for ice cubes. We don't need recipes for ice cubes, we really don't. You can get beeswax from your local beekeeper. What do you mean? I live in the city, I haven't got a local beekeeper. God's sake. Anyway, well, let's talk about all this. Let's talk about it with the brilliant Kinsey Schofield over there on the west coast of America. Hi, Kinsey, how you doing?
Hi, Kevin. Yeah, I think that we anticipated that we were inevitably going to hear these types of rumbles and whispers from the Netflix crew, that the return on investment simply is not here. But I can tell you that Megan is working overtime with her friends over at People Magazine, or as I like to call them, her spokespeople, to generate stories about what a great boss she was behind the scenes. And I'm not talking about the stories we talked about last week. There are more now about how she hired ice cream trucks to, for them during their breaks and all these other little things. So there's definitely an effort to silence the negative stories. I'd also stress that was Megan announcing her second season on Instagram. Kev, there was no big announcement about a second season. Thanks to Deadline, we know that this was greenlit for 2 seasons originally off the jump, likely contractually instigated by Megan to avoid looking like a failure from the get-go.
Exactly right. I mean, and if they've got on their hands in the can a very cheap TV series has already been made. It's surprisingly easy to make 2 episodes as you make 1. So that's what they've done. As you say, normal practice here. She's sort of spun it to look as if Netflix have gone, do you know what? This series 1 is such a success. Let's make another series. They've already made the series, and we're now learning only today, only in the last couple of hours, that actually Netflix, they're not stupid at Netflix. They're extremely concerned about the very poor reviews that everybody gave this series, and probably more importantly in terms of mass appeal, the fact that all over social media, especially TikTok, audiences are hating it, particularly young people.
Yeah, and so there's another story out. So now we have two separate outlets saying that they have spoken to sources within Netflix. One is the Daily Mail, the other is the Express. And in the Express article, they specifically say Meghan's big announcement was a strategy by Netflix and Meghan on Instagram. That was something that they came up with to distract from the incredibly hateful reviews that were coming in about her series. And it's from outlets that are typically very glowing of her. She appeared on the cover of Variety magazine, and they were the ones that called it an ego trip. I think it was Vogue that said that it lacked authenticity. And if you thought you were going to get to know more about Meghan Markle, this wasn't the venue. So even outlets that are typically very I don't know, thoughtful, over the top butt kissing of Meghan Markle, they were dismissive of this project. And as you and I both have talked about over the last few years, this is really make or break, and it looks, to people that aren't invested, it might look like a professional win for Meghan because she went on Instagram and said this was renewed. Deadline has been reporting, that this was greenlit, from the very beginning of conversations. And so this is all a facade. This is all just more PR, bending over backwards, trying to manipulate the narrative.
Yeah. Now, talking of which, her dad, so we had on this show, on the Political Asylum last week, Thomas Markle Jr., Meghan's brother, was kind enough to come on and give us his disparaging review. He said it was so boring and desperate that he actually felt sorry for her. There was something very desperate and pleading about it. I know what Tom means. But in the papers over here over the weekend, in the Mail on Sunday in particular, her dad, Thomas Markle Sr., Thomas Markle, he got involved. He hated the programme too, found it very, very boring, but was extremely annoyed. Thomas Markle Jr. was as too, with some of her suggestions about her childhood. So she's eating in the show all this sort of fresh fruit that she makes into rainbow colours, nobody knows why, cutting up fresh vegetables, millions of them, cutting vegetables and cutting stop cutting vegetables, do something else for God's sake. Anyway, this, all very fresh. And she says this is wonderful for her because she says, I grew up with a lot of fast food and also a lot of TV tray dinners. It feels like such a different time, but that was so normal with the microwavable kids' meals. Well, she said, I grew up with that, watching Jeopardy and having a lot of fast food. Well, Thomas Markle Sr., Tom Markle Jr. was angry about that. Thomas Markle Sr. is furious because he was a very successful lighting man. They lived in a nice part of LA, and he said he took his kids out for flashy restaurant meals at least 3 times a week. And they regularly went to Los Angeles' most famous restaurant, a very posh, high-caste restaurant called Musso and Frank on Hollywood Boulevard. So they regularly went there. Hollywood Boulevard, a burger there will cost you $35. So he's saying, that she's acting like I sort of chuck the kids in front of the TV with a cheap TV dinner every night. He said it's just not true. She was not a latchkey kid stuffing her face with fast food. It's not true.
Well, also, first of all, just to further this lie, there's this great clip from Meghan Markle on the Food Network during her TIG days before she meets Prince Harry, where she's judging Chop Jr. And a little girl, a little chef, a child, puts a plate in front of Meghan, and Meghan says, literally, this reminds me of growing up in California, that farm to fork lifestyle that like Meghan again saying Meghan lying, saying she's farm to fork when she's on the Food Network as a judge on Chopped Jr. the inconsistencies are glorious. But I do feel sorry for her father, because he talks about working multiple jobs, and he wasn't working multiple jobs, he says, because they were poor. He was working multiple jobs because he was highly skilled and in demand. And so he was busy, pursuing his passion, making a living, and creating a life for Meghan that ultimately opened a lot of doors for her, whether it be at the private school she went to, the college that she was able to attend, or some of the international internships and things like that she was able to pursue because daddy was paying for it. Daddy was bankrolling her. But yeah, that I felt sorry for him there, because you and I've discussed this before, the idea of her rewriting history. That's exactly what this is. She had a really good dad who provided for her very well. She herself wrote in the TIG about going to that cafe that you mentioned after dance class, after ballet class. So she panders pathetically to whatever audience she is trying to win at that exact moment. And they throw so many things at the wall trying to see what's going to stick. And developing a specific audience is also where they do that too. They are just like, who do we think likes us right now or today? And how can I'm going to be a chameleon right now and say what I think is going to impress that specific person.
Yes. Now, let's talk about the show itself. As we discussed last week, Kinsey, at great length several times, this show came in disappointingly at number 6 in the Netflix charts. So that was overnight. So they opened it like 10 hours later, a day later, it was number 6. Now, when you open a blockbuster show, you expect it to be number 1. You expect it to be number 1 for days on end, maybe even weeks on end. This came in at number 6, very disappointing considering global publicity. It has now plummeted out of the top 10 and is falling fast. So all of her plans to base her business empire on the back of this TV cooking show, they're looking to be in a bit of trouble, aren't they?
Look, she's going to have her core audience that buys the BS blissfully, and they are going to buy the edible flowers. God love them, and that's fine. But you and I both know that her ultimate objective was to gain new followers, was to gain a new audience, and to change public perception. And the content is not there. The joke is on Harry and Meghan and Netflix, because while they did, proof to me that this was greenlit for 2 seasons earlier on is the fact that this entire show, season 2, has already been shot. It's in the can, and they are unable now to go back and make any of the adjustments likely required because of legitimate criticism from TV critics that don't care about who Meghan Markle is married to. They're just there to watch TV and assess it based on entertainment value. And it's not just the projects that are bland and boring. Whether you're making a Pinterest rainbow out of fruit or bath salts, it's the personality that's struggling throughout this thing. It's the lack of authenticity. It's people catching Meghan in bold-faced lies. And that they can't go back and edit that, because season 2 is shot. It's done. And unless they want to invest even more money in reshooting things and edits, which I do not think that's where Netflix is at right now, because I understand that they did invest a significant amount in the creation of these products for Meghan. She's going to have a crappy go-round season 2. She's going to have similar complaints. The tone is going to be similar from critics when it comes to the content she's created. Yeah, and apparently in the light of its poor performance on Netflix, I think Netflix bosses have kind of gaslit themselves. They've tried to persuade themselves that she's so well known around the world, so much name recognition. How can this program fail with that amount of pre-publicity? Well, it can fail because it's boring. It's like Shakespeare said, the play is the thing.
You know, in the end, you can have as big a names as you like. If they're in a production that is boring and dud and tedious, that production will fail. So what you've got here is a very well-known woman, due to the fact she married into the British royal family, not delivering. She's delivered a boring programme, and apparently Netflix bosses now are finally beginning to regret their $100 million deal with Harry and Meghan. They're quite finally realising there might not be much in this. Now, as we said earlier, they're acting like, oh, it's in the second series, but they're just trying to make the most out of a disaster. Out of a disastrous situation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because remember how criticized Spotify was. They were torn to shreds in all of the papers that are industry focused, whether it be the Hollywood Reporter, Variety, or Deadline. There was real criticism for Spotify for wasting such a significant amount of money on Harry and Meghan, who hadn't proven themselves yet. They basically quit their jobs, and then people like Netflix and Spotify threw contracts and money at them without zero proof that they were capable of not only producing anything, but being on camera and it being personality driven. Now, it would be silly for us not to acknowledge that Harry and Meghan for Netflix was a commercial success. It was a commercial success, but it required content based around the British royal family. And while they get to pat themselves on the back for this one commercial success, what it did was alienate not only Prince Harry's family members, but a significant amount of the public who is fiercely protective of the British royal family, who are going to be very unforgiving towards Harry and Meghan going forward, based on the cruelty we saw in the last 4 years after they stepped down from Megxit. But Harry and Meghan have very little outside of the royal family. We talked about that during Polo. Remember how much Polo actually has to do with the history of the royal family, and how that would have been interesting to watch Prince Harry discuss Polo's relationship to the royal family. That's good TV, but instead we're watching these old super tan dudes cheating on their wives that are also play polo. It didn't make sense. Where the money is, where the interest lies, is within Harry and Meghan's proximity to the British royal family. And we're seeing that here with Meghan's show not being... And it's interesting because she demands the title Sussex. She wants to talk about tea parties, which is typically a British, or I think it's a British and royal family related event. She lingers in it. She flirts with it. Oh, I learned this when I was in London, like that random reference on the show. I learned this while I was living over in the UK or something. But so she recognizes where the interest lies, and that's why Prince Harry was saved for the last 15 seconds. But I do think she is still delusional enough to think that she can continue to carry this thing.
Well, she alone, I think, probably believes she can continue to carry this thing, but I think the body of opinion now is that she can't. Now, one thing I will say for her, I suppose she's keeping busy. She's at least trying, not very successfully, but she is trying. What the hell is Harry doing at the moment? Anything at all?
Well, he was out without Meghan over the weekend, which I felt like there was so much effort during Invictus to see them together and to see them physically touching each other, kissing each other. A lot of just physical touch during Invictus because of the Vanity Fair piece that came out at the end of January, claiming that someone from Meghan's camp was shopping a post-divorce Prince Harry book. And so we did see them incredibly affectionate at the Invictus Games a few weeks later. Then we see a really bizarre wave from Prince Harry in the last 15 seconds of Meghan's show. an awkward interaction. Truthfully, I felt like Prince Harry wanted to be anywhere but where he was. And then over the weekend, he was out by himself supporting Santa Barbara firefighters, doing some charity and in his element. Yeah. But I thought how strange in the middle of Meghan's PR blitz that she wouldn't be standing there next to Prince Harry to support Santa Barbara firefighters in the worst year of California's life, basically, when it comes to wildfires. Prince Harry being there alone was odd to me.
That is strange. I mean, no, I'm not deriding. I'm not going to have a go at him for trying to, reach out to firefighters. But it does seem to me to indicate a guy who has got nothing going on in his life. As I say, at least for all its disaster, Meghan Markle's busy trying to promote her useless program and get her.
Well, no, I think that this.
What's he doing? What's he doing?
No, this is his element, and I feel like we've discussed this on Recollections May Vary. Prince Harry's going to continue to pursue, with a vengeance, the charity circuit, because that's what he's used to as a royal. That's where he was comfortable as a royal. I think that Prince Harry is going to stay in the charity circuit, and he's going to check that off as his job. This is my job.
That's his job. That's his job. Going to shake hands with some Santa Ana firefighters. That's what he sees as a full-time job. That's not going to occupy him, is it?
I think that I'm coming at this from a totally different place than you are, because to me, I think I see Meghan not taking advantage of the fact that everybody's talking about her right now. Everybody's talking about her show right now, and not showing up on the arm of still somebody that is significantly more popular than she is at a Santa Barbara charity event. I think, what are you thinking? What a missed opportunity for Meghan. And we constantly have the conversation about where the future lies for these two, and I don't think it's a great look for Meghan not to be standing on Prince Harry's arm when he's honoring California firefighters.
So that's what you reckon he's going to do with the rest of his life, just sort of support charities, yeah? I support charities. I don't see it as a full-time activity.
Well, I think that he has, first of all, a very limited skill set. I also look at Polo. Look at Polo, executive producer Prince Harry.
It's a horrible program, absolutely horrible. Yeah.
I think
even worse than With Love, Meghan, and I don't say that lightly.
Really? Would you say that?
Yeah, I think well, okay, they're on a plane. They're both pretty terrible. I mean, both of those shows, Polo and Meghan with Love, in different ways, are textbook lessons in how not to make television entertainment.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Absolutely. They don't fit the template. Neither fit the template. I mean, I had this conversation about why Keeping Up with the Kardashians works. Yes, it's glossy. Yes, it's beautiful. But you see some of their worst moments too. Mm-hmm. And while they hate showing it to you, that's why it works. Because you watch them, we've seen them arrested. We've seen them divorced. Yeah. We see, and Meghan's just like, that's what her dad said. Her dad said she's so fake and obsessed with staying in the limelight. Yeah. And that desperation, she reeks of it on camera. You sense it as you're watching her show. And the Kardashians aren't like that.
Yeah, well, you talk about the Kardashians, and here's the key point. The Kardashians understand the market. First of all, they don't mind sharing some of their privacy with the viewers. That's the trade-off. We make billions of dollars, you enjoy our reality TV show. As such, the Kardashians are clever. Here's what they would never do: make the Kardashians in someone else's home. Do you see what I mean? They make it in their own home. It's really important. And Meghan never understood that it ain't no good to make a series in someone else's home posing as your home. Fundamental mistake.
I mean, one of many. I also think that they are so great about actually showing us their relationships between each other, the good, the bad, the ugly. She didn't even know Daniel was left-handed. This is a guy that has his hands in her face doing her makeup for years, and she can't even tell you that he's left-handed.
That's when he went like this. He goes, "Oh no, I'm a lefty," and I want to say, "Yeah, you're not the only one in the room," but yeah, I mean, so. I mean, coming forward, what's going to happen? I mean, presumably, more and more, she's going to struggle to portray Meghan with love, or with love Meghan as a success, because it's not a success.
No. She is going to ride the denial train all the way to season 2. I think that, I think a lot of what Meghan's doing on social media is to try to drown out people like you and me, the critics. You and I can have a fun conversation, just an organically fun conversation, and it ends up in 3 different papers because somebody agrees with us or something. And so what Meghan's going to do is she's going to throw up a picture of Prince Harry and Lily on Instagram. And now people are less likely to engage with us because actually Meghan is generating her own content about herself now. Meghan is going to try to drown out critics by continuously promoting her wins herself. So people are posting headlines like Meghan gets a season 2. No, she didn't. Meghan was greenlit for 2 seasons. This is not a time to. The actual story there is Meghan prematurely shot season 2, so now she can't make the adjustments needed to not have hell rained on her by the same critics that tore her apart round 1. I think that she is going to continue to engage with friendly media like Drew Barrymore that are not going to challenge her. And it's similar to the release of Harry and Meghan the first time. Do you remember when they released that series? It was in 2 parts, part 1 and part 2, and we had to wait a few weeks in between. That's what this is, except they've had to call it season 2 because it is going to be stretched out enough to where, fingers crossed, there's actually going to be some product that they can get out around the same time that season 2 launches. I think that that's all this is. They're trying to get that return on investment. They realize that they made a poor decision here with these 2 people, but milk what you can towards the very end. And no, I don't think they're going to get a similar contract, but going forward, they might say, pitch us something and we'll consider it. But we're certainly not going to keep you on the payroll to produce what you did over the last 5 years.
Absolutely.
That's a joke.
Yeah, with love, Meghan and Polo, if that's the best you've got. And she'll never drown us out, Kinsey. Do you want to know why? Because things may come and things may go, but the Kinsey and Kev show goes on forever. And we will talk again later in the week. Always a pleasure, Kinsey. Great stuff. Thank you very much. Kinsey Schofield there over in Los Angeles. What do you reckon? Let me know what you think about Meghan's latest machinations. 0344 499 1000. When we come back, your calls. You get some in if you like. See if you can get on the show. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk till the end of the show, so stay tuned.
over 100 schools could be forced to close because of Labour's ridiculous VAT on private schools. We also know now that that many parents have had to move their children into the state school system. Have you had any more interaction with the Secretary of State?
No. So she did say she would come and visit us. Of course, she hasn't been to see us. But it's not just us that matter. You know, she met with some school leaders. They have been asking for the same things that I am asking for. She has ignored all of us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I've got to get another commercial break in pretty soon. So what we're going to do, go to the phones, then we'll have a break, and then we'll spend the rest of the show chatting. But first up, good caller here. It's Herbie in Harrow. Hi, Herbie. You want to talk about reform? It's disappointing, isn't it? Disappointing.
Oh, very disappointing. I'm ashamed. It's like a marriage, unfortunately. We have to, we have our ups and downs, and, unfortunately, we just need to agree with things. It's a shame that this has gone this far because we need to be united, as I said before, Kev. We don't need to be divided. We've got problems this country's facing, and we don't need another war with another political party because it's going to upset the voters.
I totally agree. I think it's a shame that Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe couldn't have sorted out their differences, but I do understand they're pretty intractable. So there will be no peace settlement here. I'm afraid that Mr. Lowe will not be returning to the reform fold. But I think it's important. I think it's very disappointing, but I think it's important to remember that this shouldn't be the end of reform. They've still got an important mission. Do you think they can regroup and rebuild from this?
Well, it needs for the upper people up at head office there to come together and start to make a statement that we've got to unite and start to work together and not be divided. We can't have a war within the party. We're human beings. We all want to be top dog, Kevin, and we can't be top dog. This is the problem. Why am I top dog? Well, I'm afraid you're not. You're not good enough, or you just haven't got the makeup. We are what we are, Kevin, and unfortunately, this is life. This is life. Here it is in one. It's open, exposed. I can't be loved or liked by everybody. It's not possible. But we have our ups and downs, and hopefully you can make peace. Although I'm divorced, I still see my ex-wife. She still works for me, so it shows how good it is.
There you go. If you can work that out, then I'm sure Nigel and Rupert can work it out, except I know that Nigel and Rupert can't. But I do think, you know what they say, Herbie, a week is a long time in politics. If reform, I don't think reform have played this all that well so far, to say the least. But if they start to play a pretty straight bat with it, and they do well enough with this issue, in about a month's time, you'd be surprised. By the time we go to those local elections, I think people will have forgotten about this. But not a good moment in their history, definitely. Herbie, good to talk to you as always. Thanks for the call. Herbie in Harrow there. Your thoughts, let me know what you think about this stratospheric falling out between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage, and indeed the whole party as a whole. 03444991000. Let's go to break. Let's talk when we come back.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I've got a message here from Mike. He's on his route home, back to Devon, where he lives. He says he's on a train home to the southwest from London after a not-so-hard day consulting to the Home Office. Surprised they let Mike in. They're going to find out why. He said, I want to say that I am so upset with the reforms in fighting and Ben Habib's narrative this evening. They are my party of choice. My party of choice, and they let him into the Home Office. Hope you didn't tell anyone, Mike. He goes on to say, but there needs to be some rapid work and messaging done to assure potential voters they are real. Reform is the way forward, but not if they indulge in playground politics as they currently are. I think a lot of people feel that, Mike, but very good message and very well put. We've got lots of other messages like that saying, you know, what is going on. Somebody's saying here that it's an interesting analogy. This is David saying, Kelsey Grammer wasn't bothered when the equally brilliant David Hyde Pierce was cast as Niles in Frasier because he knew it would make the show stronger. Why is Farage seemingly so insecure about having big personalities around him? It's always the hope that kills you. Well, you know, we don't quite know that, but I do think we're talking... This is a clash of egos between Farage and Rupert Lowe, and there's only one winner in the Reform U party, and that's always Nigel Farage. I mean, I think he does rate his own star power. He's aware of his own charisma. He's aware of his achievements. He is Reform. He's what attracts people to Reform. But perhaps, I don't know, sometimes he doesn't handle his position of prominence that well. He certainly seems to have put Ben Habib out. He's put Rupert Lowe out now. Who knows what's going on? But either way, this has not been a good spectacle to see, and it's a shame, really. Right, I've got lots and lots of WhatsApp voice notes. Well, first of all, it's a bloke called Mr. Anonymous. We don't know his name, but here's his WhatsApp voice note.
Evening, Kevin. The thing that really bothers me about this is you've got two really intelligent people, allegedly. They've got a massive following now. They've given hope to loads and loads of people. And then these two intelligent men who are supposed to have the country's best interests at heart then go and air their dirty washing in public and potentially break the backbone of their own party. Is that two intelligent men? Because it leads me to the question, are these people who I put so much faith into actually the people who I want to be voting for?
Well, it's a very good WhatsApp voice note and a very good question asked there. All I would say is I have some understanding of what's gone on. Let's say the situation was untenable and, you know, there was never going to be a meeting of the two sides. It was never going to work. It got to the point where Rupert Lowe basically had to go. I'm not saying anyone's in the wrong, but such were the tensions between Rupert Lowe and the rest of the party, particularly his fellow MPs, his 4 fellow MPs in Westminster, that it just couldn't carry on. So I wouldn't necessarily say we're talking about unintelligent people, but you know the way it goes. You know, sometimes people just don't get on, and that's what's happened here, I fear. Here's Jerry, also on Reform UK.
Hi, Kev. I tend to agree with Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib. I think Farage has got to go. Unfortunately, he's trying to play the kind of easy cards where he wants to stay kind of middle of the roads, and he wants to be a likeable politician to all people. Unfortunately, with the current status of the United Kingdom with illegal immigrants, you can't be like that. You're going to have to be slightly hardline, like Donald Trump.
Good point, Jerry. Well made again. Got quite a few more. We'll come back to them in a minute. But first, let's get back to the phones and talk to Steve in Luton. Hello, Steve. What would you like to say?
Hello, yeah, right, evening, happy days, Merry Christmas.
Really happy days, yeah. Go on.
I'm not sure if you're allowed to say that, Luton, are you?
Probably not.
Right, anyway, I'll get to the point, I won't bubble on. Right, we need, listen, I'm fed up with the media going on about everything for the last 40 years. I was in the BNP and we were leafleting about the grooming gangs 40 years ago. I've spoken to the police, I've spoken to Muslim taxi drivers. They declared to me there's no Sharia law. It's about time that we put feet on the ground and had a mass demonstration at number 10 or all the town halls around the country, because we need to stand up. There's too much gone wrong. Everything's against the white working class, even the middle class. I mean, they're probably fed up of paying all the taxes, potholes, $6.5 billion to immigrants and hotels. We don't want them here. They're not like us. They're nowhere near like us. And they're no good to us. We got to get rid of the ECU, whatever it is.
ECHR, yeah.
Yeah, get rid of that. Have some balls and get rid of it, and we run our own country. That's what we should.
That's what we should do. But we have to let politicians do this. I hope personally. I don't support any party in particular, Steve. But I hope Reform UK can get their act back together, because I do think they were selling an interesting message, probably a message that's good for this country. But at the moment, they're all over the place due to infighting, which is always sorry to see. But it's an inevitability in politics, I'm afraid. Steve, good call. Thank you very much for ringing. Steve in Luton. Before we go back to a break and then more of your calls, let's go back to the WhatsApp voice notes. And this is, I think it's the same Claire. She always sends such brilliant WhatsApp voice notes. And here's tonight's again on Reform UK.
Evening, Kevin. Nigel Farage is trying to be everything to everyone. He undoubtedly is the focus to Reform UK, but how can he now turn around to the members of his party and the country and declare that he wouldn't be deporting illegals? It's complete appeasement, and it's like closing the barn door and slamming it in our face. So by the next election, how many more illegal migrants and legal migrants will have flooded into our country, been given citizenship and given homes, and Nigel Farage will leave be for fear of upsetting the radical left? It's a disgrace. And who now is going to champion our cause?
I'm disconcerted by Nigel Farage. He said that deportations, mass deportations, just are not practically possible. He may have a point, but it's not the kind of message we're used to hearing from Reform UK. One of the falling out issues, one of the issues that Nigel and Rupert Lowe have fallen out about, is that Rupert Lowe has been very vociferously calling, both in the Chamber, in the House of Commons and in public and on social media, for mass deportations of the illegal migrants that are here illegally. Nigel Farage just says he's not interested in that. It won't be possible. Well, I'm not quite sure that is a popular message to the members of Reform UK. So I think Claire's making a good point there. We're going to go to break now. When we come back, we'll speak to Nigel in Northants.
over 100 schools could be forced to close because of Labour's ridiculous VAT on private schools. We also know now that that many parents have had to move their children into the state school system. Have you had any more interaction with the Secretary of State?
No. So she did say she would come and visit us. Of course, she hasn't been to see us. But it's not just us that matter. You know, she met with some school leaders. They have been asking for the same things that I am asking for. She has ignored all of us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Before we go to Nigel in Northants, here's one more WhatsApp voice note. This is from David. Again, it's about Reform UK.
Good evening, Kevin. This is just like a company. You imagine the CEO at the top of the company in charge, and you got someone underneath him trying to overtake the company he's built. What does he do? He has to get rid of that person, put him in his place. And that's what Nigel has done. And this is what the party has done. Let's get it together, eh?
Yeah, I think that allegory of comparing Reform UK to a company run by Nigel Farage might be at the centre of the problems. A lot of people don't like the way Reform UK is run, and they say it gives Nigel Farage too much personal power. That may be at the heart of why Rupert Lowe is so upset, and I know it is at the heart of why Ben Habib left the party. So let's go back to the phones. Let's talk to Nigel in Northamptonshire. Hello, Nigel.
Hi, Kevin.
You're a member of Reform. How are you feeling about the whole situation?
I'm sick to the back teeth of Ben Habib, quite frankly.
Well, you would be if you're a member of Reform, yeah.
Well, not just that. I mean, I've been in UKIP and Brexit Party, and we've seen the likes of Ben come and go, quite frankly. But he's turned into a ranting maniac. He's become self-serving, self-centred, big-headed. He's not serving anybody any good, apart from his own ego. And the idea that he'd have done better in Wellingborough without Nigel Farage is for the birds. He wouldn't have got any more than a handful of votes without Nigel Farage.
But apart from the party line, Nigel, you've got Ben Habib saying the problem with Reform UK is that Nigel Farage does have a kind of messiah complex, and he does have too much personal power. And then you get another major figure in the party a few months later, Rupert Lowe, saying exactly the same thing. Don't you see a pattern building up here?
No, not really. Because these people have been before. They just get to a position where they suddenly think their own persona is greater than the party, and then they come down with a crash because they find that they're not. And the party will survive. Both of these two characters.
It's been badly wounded by this, though, hasn't it?
Well,
yes, it has, really, Nigel. You've got to admit. Wounded. No. Don't come on here like a public relations person for Reform. It's been badly wounded. This is a bad look. The public hate parties that are disunited. Reform UK right now look very disunited.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. They do, absolutely. When you've only got 5 MPs, then
but you went to 20% of them are falling out with the rest of them. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think it's more a question of what do the party members think of it rather than 2 MPs.
I agree. Look, Nigel, I'm going to have to leave right now, but I do agree with you. I believe that Reform UK can emerge from this probably stronger and better. But they do have some work to do. They've got a mountain to climb. This is not good. But I take your point, and it's really good of you to call. Really interesting. Thank you very much. Call me again. Nigel in Northamptonshire there. Better go back to the WhatsApp voice notes. Got to get through them. I always promise to play them all. So here we go. We've got another Jerry here. This Jerry is talking about the migrants.
Okay, here's a thing to think. See, with those 1.8 million illegal immigrants that are here, if only 5% of them are terrorists looking to harm the great British public, that makes 90,000. 90,000. Thinking that is more than the British Army have in numbers. It's a really frightening prospect. It really is.
He's right about that. I mean, we don't know the statistics at all, the percentages, but what we do know is that all of these migrants who turn up on small boats and then get given hotels and free food and all that, we don't know anything about them because they usually throw all their documents into the English Channel. So good point. Here's again on the difficult topic of the migrants is Darren.
Evening, Kev. I've worked out in the last 10 days or so, we've had 2,240 migrants crossing the channel. If you say it's £8 a night on average for them to stay over a year each, and then say £20 a night for a hotel room, which is a very, very low estimate, that works out at £17 million. And then add on the lawyers, the doctors and the dentists and everything else, you're talking well over 20 million quid. So just say in a year, all these people start working. How long would it take to get that 20 million quid back in income tax? I don't think we'll ever get it back, Kev. We're being taken for mugs.
Darren's got a good point. Actually, if you take the just the migrants who turned up last week, more than 2,000 of them, that will cost us, you, me and everybody else, taxpayers of this country, £80 million over the next year. So last week, last 8 days, we've had £80 million worth of migrants turn up here. That's how much it's going to cost us. That's good, isn't it? Last WhatsApp voice note, this is Ray on the BBC.
Hello, Kev. When you were going on about why won't the BBC say Hamas is a terrorist organisation, what you've got to consider is the BBC Arab service, which has caused all sorts of problems, and I think they're just keeping a low profile.
Yeah, the BBC Arabic is an absolute joke, totally pro-Palestine, totally against Israel. In fact, the entire BBC journalistic operation is, many say, anti-Semitic. It's certainly pro-Palestine and anti-Israel, at the very least. Maybe anti-Semitic. What do you think? Let's go back to the phones. Let's talk to Laura Jane in Hampshire. Hello, Laura Jane.
Hi. I'm just ringing about the reform situation.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Well, I think on Friday I was completely anti Rupert Lowe and thought, oh my God, this is a disaster, and you know, poor everyone else. Then the more I thought about it over the weekend, the more I realised that why did I originally sign up for reform? I originally signed up for reform because we wanted something new. We obviously want reform. We need a new type of government, and we want to get rid of politicians like what now over the weekend, what has happened? We've had infighting. We've had, I don't know who to believe, which is often the situation. It's very difficult to tell. And there we go. Same old.
They feel like the Tories, didn't they? All of a sudden, just fighting like rats in a sack. What I would say to you, Laura Jane, is I've made quite a lot of inquiries myself. I do know some of the people involved, and the only thing I feel that I can honourably reveal without betraying secrets is that this situation is not solvable. It is intractable. Rupert Lowe will not be rejoining the party. There'll be no rapprochement dinners. He's gone and he won't be coming back. I think what Reform have got to get used to is that is the facts, and they've got to accept that and move on and get back to what they're supposed to be doing. I don't think this is terminal. It just has been a very, very bad few days for them. I don't think it is. It's been a very bad few days for them.
Yeah. And we need, problem is, we need people of Rupert Lowe's calibre, their brain, you know, their intellect, and that's going to be difficult to persuade, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, except for sometimes you get two very talented people who just don't get on. It would be best if they did. It'd be best if Farage and Lowe got on like a house on fire, but they just don't. And it's a human situation, and Reform have got to put it behind them, and I think Rupert Lowe has too. One of those things, I'm afraid, Laura Jane, but don't give up yet. Don't give up yet. I think the project will get back onto track fairly soon. Laura Jane there in Hampshire. Got time now to talk to Carl. He's in Liverpool. Hello, Carl. What would you like to say?
Hi, Kev. You all right?
I'm all right, mate, yeah.
Yeah, it was just about Reform. At first, when it came out, I thought it was a playground spat, but this is actually done a little bit, quite a bit of damage to the party.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Nigel Farage, I mean, he hates the party. And my message to him would be, sort out your house, because the country needs your party.
Couldn't agree with you more.
We have seen Labour capitulate in the short months that they've been in, one scandal after another. I mean, if you look at what happened recently with the MP in Runcorn...
Yeah, Mike Amesbury, yeah.
Yeah, you know, this is an in-house problem that reform of... And they've come out with it, they shouldn't have. But we're getting to see now Labour just fall apart.
Well, they're falling apart. Let's hope the reform doesn't. I've got to move on, Carl, but very good points, as always, from you. Thank you very much. Call me again. Carl in Liverpool. And it's Petri Hoskin in the studio. Sorry I haven't given you long. What's on your show?
We're heading to Canada to talk about...